We never know where life will lead us or what may hinder us along the way. But while every day can feel like one big question mark, it doesn't have to. With the right insights, strategies, and solutions from Western and Southern Financial Group, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind.
Back in studio alone, though. We were by ourselves. Yeah. Quinn out sick. You're only going to see, if you're watching on YouTube, this shot. And I don't know how to turn on the back camera things here. So
the
it's
fake city.
The fake city we throw up. So it's going to be a little bit of an interesting look on YouTube. Audio will be just as clean as ever. But that's not going to put us down. We're coming off a dub in trivia last night.
Oh, yes.
We can't miss.
I'm still riding high, to be honest. This is what, 4 straight for us? You've been around for a couple of them, but 4 straight dubs for the trivia team. We just can't miss.
One of the highlights, or I guess low light, was they were asking a question about where Josh Allen went to school. And they said Josh Allen went to school in a city called Laramie, which is in a state with the lowest population in the United States. This is gifting it to people. Gifting it. I wanted him to say he went to Wyoming. What city is Wyoming in? Because I had it. I was in Laramie twice covering the Mountain West Championship against Josh Allen. It was awesome. Yeah. Cold as hell. It was awesome. Very cool. I wanted to open the podcast with this, though. I had a little take. I dropped the take on unpaid internships on Twitter. Okay. And it kind of, people are reacting to it, getting some wild DMs and those things. And a lot of people are asking me, you got to tell your life story. You got to tell how you got out of it. Your parents are crazy. How'd you get out of it? We're not going to get into that, okay? I ran away from home when I was 16, and a lot happened between that and after that and all this crazy stuff. But I will say this about my senior year and sleeping in my car. I was taking so many unpaid internships as a senior, and I didn't really have like a huge opportunity to like potentially pay rent when I was coming from my junior to senior year. I'm coming back from a summer camp, between my junior and senior year, where I was not paying rent. I was out there in a summer camp for 3 months in Maine. When I came back, I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna have enough money working I was working as a editor for sports, the Daily Aztec at San Diego State, which was $8 an hour, up to 15 hours a week. And I was working as a writing tutor for San Diego State. I think it was like $10 an hour, up to 20 hours a week. And rent in San Diego, I split a master bedroom with $650. That's not including utilities. Jesus. Like splitting a room. So, people are saying, well, you couldn't find a couch to crash on. My second semester, when I finally got a job at Fox Sports San Diego that was paid, I paid him $300 a month to sleep on his couch. Like that's how dire straits it was in California. But in that time,
I think I paid $400 for like a nice place in South Bend.
That's incredible. Yeah. So so I come back from this summer camp. I'm like, I'm not going to pay rent. I don't have enough money. I'm going to try and sleep in my car. I buy a new car. It's a wagon, $1,000 from this woman named Phyllis. Buy this car, $1,000. I start sleeping in the car in the parking lot. Couple weeks in, I get caught. You say, dude, you can't sleep in the car. I get caught once. I say, oh, sorry, I was just like in between classes. Second time, they're like, dude, we know you're sleeping in your car. You can't do this. And then here comes the mystery. I was sleeping. San Diego State had a 24-hour library. Slept in there a handful of times. KCR, the radio station I worked at, had a office space that no one was at night. I slept in there a handful of times. I would actively go to parties looking for someone to stay the night with. Like it's like, oh man, I could probably sleep here. I slept with my girlfriend at the time, and it was a grind, dude. I was like, for 4 or 5 months, I never knew where I was going to sleep that night. I was like, is it going to be my car tonight? Is it going to be this office? Whatever. All because I was writing for like 4 different site aggregators, all these different places that like you're producing work for, spending time doing, and getting paid $0 for. Yeah. And I'll finish with this. That was a grind, and I learned a lot from it, the sacrifice and all that stuff. People on the internet who are talking about unpaid internships are like, I would never trade that in for the world. And I probably wouldn't either. Like I learned a lot from it. I grew at it. But the onus isn't on the people that are taking unpaid internships. I get that they were valuable. I get that the sacrifice was valuable and that you wouldn't trade it for the world. Yeah. The onus is on if you are paying people or if you are hiring people to work and produce work for you, pay them. That's it. Full stop. And you're like, well, what about the experience? What about the mentorship? It's like, then teach them and mentor them on your own time. But if you're having them complete, send in, produce work, pay them for it.
Yeah, I remember when I first even like heard about the concept of unpaid internships. I'm like, so like what the fuck? Like, so you're just doing work for no reason.
Yes.
It's like I that blew my mind. It was probably like in high school. And it's just like that's a thing that people do.
Some of it is like for college credit, and some of it's like, oh, you get experience and all this stuff. It's like, okay, if it's a college class, I get it.
Yeah.
If it's for experience, then just teach me. I don't have to produce anything. I don't have to send in work or nothing.
Yeah.
Teach me. But if it's going to be producing work and actually being a part of a team, I think you should be paid. But sleeping in my car and sleeping at random people's houses was an absolute treat. Learned a lot from it. My second half of my senior year, I slept on my buddy's couch for $300 a month, and that's how I got to PFF.
But that's also why we say, like, people always ask us, well, how do you work PFF? How do you get your job? We say, like, do work. Like, you can do work on your own nowadays.
Yes.
So you can do work that you enjoy doing and produce it at a place for free somewhere, like whether it's Twitter, whether it's, you know, a blog that you run, but like just going and writing for an unpaid blog is no different. Like that looks no different for you. Like
Exactly. If you're looking to gain experience, gain that on your own time, doing your own work. You know, there were times where I'm working an unpaid internship and say I can't make it on Christmas. They're like, what are you talking about? It's like, what? Like this is my time. You know. Anyway, I'm not going to get into it more. I do think that, you know, people asking me to tell me how I made it and all that stuff, it's like, that's a longer story. But I will say my senior year, the unpaid internship thing, it was an interesting one. Wouldn't trade it for the world. But if you are hiring people to work, pay them. That's all I've got on that subject. Let's now dive into Bleacher Report's latest draft ranking. So Bleacher Report.
I wanted to touch on, people are asking why, like what I say about Chris Sims.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I said I can't take him seriously. Like why I can't take him seriously. And it's not his takes or whatever that I can't take seriously. He does good work. He does the analysis. Like I trust that. It's the way he presents himself and his analysis as
absolute
as the only guy who does the work. And it's like that's what I push back on. If you'll think back to the really like the tipping point or like the point where I was like, what's going on with this guy was it was 2 years ago, I want to say, after the 2018 season. He did his quarterback rankings from that 2018 season. And he had Drew Brees 10th, Tom Brady 9th. That was the year Drew Brees was second in the MVP voting. That was the year Tom Brady and the Patriots won Super Bowl, beat the Rams. He had him 9th and 10th. He had guys like Cam Newton, Matt Ryan, Ben Roethlisberger ahead of those two. And he kept saying there's system quarterbacks. Put them in a different system, they're not going to succeed. Well, okay, but in that system, they were fucking amazing, the respective ones. And then what really like was and when you are the guy who is out on their own limb, which you are calling Drew Brees and Tom Brady the 9th and 10th best quarterbacks in the NFL, you kind of have the onus of explanation for why you have that.
Yeah.
Other people challenging that opinion, they don't have to say why, because everyone believes that Tom Brady is, top 5 quarterback, Drew Brees top 5 quarterback at that time. They don't have to explain necessarily why. And it was Kurt Warner said something about it, and then this was Chris Sims' response.
So when you see guys like Kurt Warner doing the very same list and having Tom Brady number 1 and almost mocking you for your just inability to see it for what it is, like how do you feel about that?
Part-time analyst Kurt Warner, the troll. Oh no, like I don't care what Kurt Warner says.
But don't you think
way deeper in the weeds on all these subjects than Kurt Warner?
So you're saying, hold on, Chris. So you're saying Kurt Warner is just surfacing this, right? He's not diving deep. He's not looking at the all 22. He's just kind of going for the names. That's all he's doing.
I don't think I think he's taking the easy way out. I'm saying it right there. Yes, I am. I respect his opinion. I understand he knows a lot, but I've seen him on the NFL channel like once in the last 50 days. I'm there every day, telling you everything about football, studying it, and I'm not saying I'm perfect. But, yeah, I disagree with Kurt Warner's rankings, so I don't care. Great.
And so if that's your response to Kurt Warner, a Super Bowl winning quarterback who I think knows his way around, and it doesn't take much time and effort to watch all the throws of a guy in a season, maybe a couple hours to do so. Nowadays with cut-ups and that sort of thing, that's like you don't lose me with your analysis. You lose me with the way you present it. Like, I don't believe in one guy having a crazy take and being like, all credibility lost. It's like, no, I believe he came to that take in reasonable fashion. But when you present it like that, where as this analysis as this black and white thing that he has figured out when like we know it's not black and white. Like there's Asians playing in the NFL too, so it's not black and white.
Yeah,
that's a bad joke. But there's a lot of gray area in play evaluation. It's something I push back on here at PFF too when we present things as black and white, and it's like, oh, our opinion came from watching the tape, so it's the correct opinion. It's like,
no, I think there's even analysts here at PFF, even ourselves, where there's opportunity to be less black and white and less absolute with how we deliver takes and deliver analysis. Even recently, Chris Sims said something along the lines of, there's a lot of guys out there that are unqualified to have opinions on this. And it's like, okay, you don't have to be condescending when what you're doing is like watching 21-year-olds and seeing if they're good. Like I have this joke all the time with my friends. It's like, my job is largely this guy footballs better than this other guy footballs. And like, it's a joke, it's a game. And I do think that delivering analysis with condescending tones and stuff is something that a lot of people can check themselves on. But
that was it.
I appreciate the explanation.
I'm not challenging his actual quarterback knowledge. I believe in that wholesale, but that's the presentation.
Don't be a dick. Mike Renner's latest novel. All right, this is from Bleacher Report. Bleacher Report put together an all-star team. Nate Tice, Brandon Thorne, Justice Mosqueda, Corey Giddings to put together a draft board. Obviously, Matt Miller is no longer at Bleacher Report, so they're kind of like, I think, bringing a combination of people on to still put together. Oh, have they?
Or like they did it for the NFL.
Yeah,
like 1,000 or whatever was kind of
a group of people scouting the NFL. But now they have like this similar take on the NFL draft. And we won't necessarily look deep at their big board because it does look like each analyst, depending on the position group, graded on a different scale. Some of these guys,
I think there was a little bit of that.
So for example, like some of these guys, I think the offensive line is kind of heavily rated. Like Landon Dickerson is 6th overall. Like that, again, that's not factoring positional value. To put him ahead of like guys like Trey Lance and Zach Wilson, like you're not going to go into an NFL draft with that as your draft board in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think there's 12 linemen in the first 32.
Like Elijah Vera Tucker is 10. I think that speaks to what Brandon Thorne loves Elijah Vera Tucker.
Yeah.
But he's not drafting him over, I don't think, Jamar Chase, some of these other quarterbacks that are listed. You're going to factor in positional value. So what we're going to focus on is touching on some of the differences of opinion and highlights in their quarterback or in their position ranking. Starting with quarterback, they have Trevor Lawrence, Fields, Lance, Wilson at 4, then Mac Jones and Trask. What's your opinion of the Wilson slander?
I can see it. Like there's a argument to be made for each, and that they are all incredibly talented, but all kind of have their niche of where they really excel. Trevor Lawrence is everywhere. He's actually kind of on his own tier. But Fields, it's like, man, just super accurate with the football. If he makes the decision, if he lets it rip, it's normally a good decision. It's normally on target. It's the letting it rip that's been the problem. And some just like games this year that were legitimately bad. And when you play bad games against better competition, that's like, those are red flags on your tape. Zach Wilson didn't have those, but he also didn't play good competition.
Yeah.
And so what he's doing, the ease of it in terms of just like having to operate that offense with as much time as he had with the defense he was facing, a lot of guys could have looked good. Now, I think you can still evaluate the throw and how impressive they were. And that's where he stacks up, is almost like unquestioned the top from this past season in college football. And that the throws he was making were the most impressive of any quarterback in this class. But quarterbacking is still like not, again, pure arm talent only gets you so far. And then the Trey Lance thing, he's the most physically talented of this bunch, but just we don't know.
Yeah.
You just
I think you saw Mel Kiper Jr. of ESPN, recently say he was on a call. He does like a national call with a lot of beat reporters and those things. Talk about Zach Wilson, and like the number one concern for him even is, cupcake schedule. Did not play against good competition. I think he's going to consistently see that knock as we kind of move forward. Running backs, they have Najee Harris at 1, Javonte Williams at 2, which I thought was interesting, and then Michael Carter of North Carolina, and then Travis Etienne. Putting Williams at 2 over Etienne, like you can buy into it if you love his game, love the force miss tackle ability, and I think he's very good in pass protection. But Carter over Etienne is where I start to like, oh man, I would definitely take Travis Etienne over Michael Carter.
Yeah, Carter's very good though. Like Carter as the running back 3, he's our running back 4. I'm not gonna. If you're drafting Michael Carter, there are things he does better than Travis Etienne. I think he's a better pure route runner than Travis Etienne at this point in his career. But man, Etienne, I just fall in love with that level of athleticism, explosiveness, what that brings to the table, what that can do. Mm-hmm. You can do more things with Etienne than you can with Carter. Carter is just like a very solid kind of all-around running back, where Etienne tend to fall in love with the high end and guys like that.
Wide receivers, they have a ton of wide receivers ranked in their top 100, so you have a lot there. I'm just going to run through probably like their top 10 and go from there. Devontae Smith at 1, Rashad Bateman at 2, Jamar Chase at 3. Rashad Bateman at 2 is that's the highest I've seen Bateman considered in this wide receiver class. And then
and even like we're saying, there's the scale or whatever might be need a little tweaking. He's 9th overall on their board, so not just like that's high.
That's very high.
Yeah.
And Nate Tice is the guy who does the wide receiver rankings. I've had a couple, messages back and forth with him. He's a big fan of Bateman, and that's evidenced here, obviously putting him ahead of Jamar Chase. And then at 4, Jalen Waddle of Alabama. Terrace Marshall continues to be higher ranked than where we have him. They have him at 5. Elijah Moore at 6. Rondale Moore at 7. Diami Brown of North Carolina at 8, which I love. Amon-Ra St. Brown at 9, and then Tylan Wallace at 10. Some key guys that I think are left out of that that's interesting. Amari Rodgers of Clemson at 11, Tony at 12, Kadarius Toney of Florida at 12, and then Tutu Atwell at 16 on that list. So I think that's I definitely agree with some of the Tutu Atwell dropping. But the Kadarius Toney down at 12, that's the lowest I've seen Toney considered. Absolutely lowest I've seen Toney considered. And I know Nate Tice does a lot of analysis or has a lot of opinions on, these gadget types, these guys that are like you're going to use in a very specific role and devaluing them compared to receivers that can actually play the position well and run at the X or the Z in different positions like that.
I still think Toney has the capability. He just was used as a gadget type because he was so fucking good at it. Like, he was just awesome in that role. And that's why, Florida's offense this year was juggernaut with the talent they had. So that I like the Bateman take though. Feel like I'm not crazy.
Yeah. We have a wide receiver 4.
Yeah, Bateman's awesome. To me, he's closer to the tier 1 of wide receivers in terms of he can bring you that X skill set. He can bring that all around game to the table where you could see him catching 120 balls, 1,500 yards. I don't see. I'd be hard pressed for me to see like Elijah Moore, Rondale Moore catching 120 balls for 1,500 yards. They feel more like 90 catch, 110, 1,010, 100 yards, 1,100 yards.
1,100 yards.
Fucking ruining that one. Feel more like Jarvis Landry-esque stat lines. Maybe not necessarily Elijah Moore, but like Rondale Moore, kind of what he's bringing to the table. So
2 more questions on their wide receiver rankings. What do you think is the biggest reason Terrace Marshall Jr. is considered highly or valued highly in this class? And 2, they have superlatives on this as well. Best route runner, Tylan Wallace. I did not see that coming.
I did not see that coming. That one blows my mind.
Yeah, same. I thought you'd have Bateman there. Or, if you're going to consider him at 2.
Yeah, Devontae Smith probably the best actual like pure route runner, or Rashad Bateman. Like if Tylan Wallace is your best route runner, should be higher than wide receiver 10 because
should be higher than Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's
he's
for damn
good at
sure.
the catch point, and he's fast as well, not just Exos fast. Like
I have to bring Nate Tice on. I think he'd be a good guest on the podcast. We'll work on that. But the Terrace Marshall question.
Oh, he's physical skill set. I think is why tall, fast, long. It's a good starting point.
That'll get you.
Yeah.
Tight ends, we don't have to talk about this a ton. They only have 3 ranked. Kyle Pitts, number 1, and then a distance down is Pat Freiermuth of Penn State at 2, and then Brevin Jordan at 3. I don't think there might be some different opinions after Pitts, but I think it's kind of what do you want at the position after Pitts? You're not getting, in my opinion, an elite difference maker at the position. Maybe Freiermuth develops into that. Maybe Brevin Jordan used in the right system, but Pitts is the guy, and then everyone else is kind of like day 2, day 3 targets. Am I right?
Yeah, the tight end class, the thing is, like, there's really only a few that you can really hang your hat on as they can start in the NFL. And I'm not even sure that includes Brevin Jordan. Brevin Jordan's going to be kind of gadgety for the position, almost like
Gerald Everett.
Yeah, there you go. Like, you're going to have a little different role for him. He's not just your do-it-all, any offense in the NFL. He fits him. That, I think, is Hunter Long. That, I think, is Pat Freiermuth. That's and then Kyle Pitts, and that's like your three right there that you'd feel comfortable about.
Offensive tackles here. Now, this is scouted by Brandon Thorne, who's a big offensive line guru on Twitter. I would definitely encourage you to follow him. Just Google or Twitter search Brandon Thorne. I don't know the handle off the top of my head. But at 1, he has Penei Sewell. At 2, Tevin Jenkins, Oklahoma State at offensive tackle. Rashawn Slater at 3 of Northwestern. Christian Darrisaw at 4, Virginia Tech. Liam Eichenberg of Notre Dame at 5. Sam Cosmi of Texas at 6. Brady Christensen with the same score as Sam Cosmi, tied for 7th, but right now, I mean, tied for 6th technically from a number standpoint, but he has him at 7th. Alex Leatherwood of Alabama at 8, and then Jalen Mayfield at 9. That, honestly, I've seen a lot of people really like Jalen Mayfield. Daniel Jeremiah likes Jalen Mayfield. ESPN guys do. Yeah. To see Thorne as low or at least similarly low on Mayfield as we are, I think is very encouraging.
Yeah, we're in the exact same range on Mayfield, which, again, probably the only person I've seen have him in that range. The Christian one, though, is very interesting to me because obviously graded out extremely well.
He's like one of the highest graded players in the country this past year.
But he's in the same boat as Zach Wilson that he really faced nobody. Like the only guy he did face, Peyton Turner, Houston edge, kind of got him a few times. I can't believe he didn't go to Senior Bowl. True. That would have been a really good.
Eichenberg didn't either.
Yeah. I don't think Eichenberg necessarily needed it, though. Like, this is the highest I've seen anyone be on Brady Christensen. If he goes higher than the 3rd round, I'd be floored.
No Walker Little.
Or even 3rd. That one's interesting.
Also, he said he considers Jackson Carman, the Clemson offensive tackle, a guard, even though I talked to him recently, and he said, and I think this will play on a future episode, he said every single NFL team considers him a tackle. Yeah. And obviously, I mean, he's coming from a little bias, and then he says multiple teams see me as one of their top tackles. But I do think that, I don't think he's lying in that NFL teams see him as a tackle. I really do like his prospects as a tackle. The problem has been he's still very young. He's like 20, 21 years old with all this athletic ability and still needs to kind of develop technically at the position.
Yeah.
All right. The other thing I wanted to talk about is Tevin Jenkins. You wrote the article for PFF.com, is one of those guys that we are higher on than the consensus right now. The consensus EDP, according to grindingthemocks.com by Benjamin Robinson. And he has him at number 2. That's another encouraging sign that Thorne's got our back here.
Yeah, I really like Tevin Jenkins. And that's the thing is he uses his hands so well. I think a lot of just trying to glean into Brandon Thorne's mind. And I follow his newsletter too. If you're really interested in offensive line play, it's a great resource to subscribe to. It loves the technical aspect. Like these guys, outside of maybe Penei Sewell, like the technically sound guys, he's super high on. Seemingly, like that's Christensen. That's definitely Landon Dickerson. That's Elijah Vera Tucker. That's Creed Humphrey. That's Tevin Jenkins here. And that's why he's OT2 ahead of Slater in this one.
Interior offensive line, he has Dickerson 1, loves Dickerson. Big fan of him. He's number 6 on their overall board if you use their numerical rankings. Elijah Vera Tucker at 2, Creed Humphrey at 3, a little bit ways, Wyatt Davis at 4, Deontay Brown at 5. And then outside looking in, Jackson Carman at 8, Trey Smith at 7, Ben Cleveland of Georgia at 6, and then Royce Newman, Mississippi at 9. What is a lot of interior offensive linemen ranked? What's your opinion of the depth of this class after a guy like Wyatt Davis?
I really like it. I think now I'm not super high on Deontay Brown, Trey Smith, but I think they in the right scheme can succeed. I think there's a lot of 3rd round type talent at guard, center in this draft class that I don't think was necessarily there last year.
Interior defensive line, this was scouted by Justice Mosqueda, another good follow on Twitter. This one's interesting. He has Davian Nixon of Iowa. I know a guy that you are markedly lower on compared to the consensus right now. He has him at 1, significantly higher too, at 8.51 on his scale, while Jay Tufele of USC at number 2 at a 7.83. And then further down, Jalen Twyman of Pittsburgh at 3, Christian Barmore of Alabama at 4, Levi Wuzurike of Washington at 5, and then Carlos Basham Jr. at 6. Considering him an interior defensive lineman.
This is like the one position where I was just like, whoa. Like,
it's crazy.
The rankings.
Yeah.
Because I feel very strong that Barmore is the best defensive tackle in this class. And like the Davion Nixon rating here being that much higher than Jay Tufele is how I feel about Barmore and DT2 on the PFF board, which is Lee McNeil. So this is very interesting to me. The Davion Nixon, I don't think he's that physically imposing. Like I don't think with his level of grading, which was not good, graded in the 70s in run defense and pass rush last year. With that level of grading, how he performed on the football field over the course of the season, to convince me he deserves to be in that conversation, he better be like Levi Nwuzurike. I think Levi Nwuzurike is probably the most athletic, explosive, physical specimen at the defensive tackle position. And he's not. I don't think Davion Nixon is.
All right, moving to his edge rankings. Don't want to read every single one here. We got to get to your article for PFF.com. But at edge, he has Kwity Paye as his edge 1. Rashad Weaver at edge 2. Guy I talked to last night who, I will say this, he's an exceptional interviewer, very smart guy. Talked about his preparation process and how he approaches the game. I think anytime you talk to pass rushers like a Weaver, where he isn't Jalen Phillips explosive, Jason Owe explosive, they have to consistently win with technique, their hands, and film study, and he is that. He is a guy that mentally, football IQ-wise, was one of the more impressive football players I've talked to. That interview drops, I think, in a future episode here, maybe, I think, March 8th or March 10th. But Rashad Weaver at 2, Ronnie Perkins at 3, then Joseph Asai of Texas. Yeah. And then finally, some of the names that you've heard consistently mocked in the first round, Jason Owe of Penn State at 5, Gregory Rousseau of Miami at 6, and then Jalen Phillips of Miami at 7. Azeez Ojulari all the way down to 9, Tryon at 10. What's your opinion of these rankings?
Yeah, the Azeez Ojulari ranking is the one that blows my mind, because he has Quincy Roche at 8, Azeez Ojulari at 9, which they're just... Ojulari is the much better athlete of the two, and they were similarly productive and similarly skilled in how they rush the passer, and similarly undersized, to where Roche is 2 years older, maybe almost 3, and not as good an athlete. That one that would blow my mind if I'm like on a draft board, second round, 2 guys sitting there to take Roche over Ojulari.
Yeah, those are some interesting rankings, some wild rankings. Might have to get Justice on as well. Linebacker, he actually has Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah of Notre Dame at 1, ahead of Micah Parsons, which that's the first I've seen of that. Mm-hmm. Micah Parsons at 2, then Chaz Surratt, North Carolina at 3. That is another area where that's the highest I've seen him ranked in a linebacker ranking. Zaven Collins of Tulsa at 4, Dylan Moses of Alabama at 5, ahead of, at 6, Nick Bolton of Missouri, and then also ahead of, a few ways down, Jabril Cox of LSU at 10.
Yeah. That was, again, Moses, man. If he succeeds in the NFL, I think I'd give up on scouting linebackers. If he's really good in the NFL, the things like that go into good linebacking play in terms of like how you have to see the game and key on things and like play fast. It just doesn't do yet. And like physically has it for the position, and he's not Micah Parsons in that he's not as big, not as long, but he has that level of explosiveness. But he didn't play well at Alabama, is all I'll say. Fair.
I mean, but I do think that a lot of that has to be projection of him being better, because he is this freaky athlete.
I would hope so.
But I definitely think the more I look at these rankings, specifically Justice Mosqueda's, I think hearing more about his process to scouting defensive line and linebackers, I think would be interesting, because his is definitely, regardless of whose opinion you're at.
Yeah, because I can't also like make heads or tails of like a theme to these rankings of like.
Because like if you're looking at purely off athletic ability, Chaz Surratt at 3, or I guess Chaz Surratt is an athlete, but like measurables wise, I mean, short arms, not necessarily like ideal length for the position. But again, I think talking to him about his process, that's another guy we should probably have on the podcast. I've had a handful of conversations with him on Twitter. Cornerback, this is by Corey Giddings. I actually don't follow Corey Giddings' work, but he has Patrick Surtain at 1, Caleb Farley of Virginia Tech at 2, J.C. Horn at 3, Greg Newsome at 4, Asante Samuel Jr. at 5. I do think that is where we've seen a bulk majority of rankings, because these are relatively chalky.
Yeah, we have the same 5 in the top 5 right now.
And then at safeties, we'll finish here. Trayvon Moore at 1, Javon Holland of Oregon, my guy, Oakland's own, Bishop O'Dowd, grad at 2, and then Paris Ford of Pittsburgh at 3.
Did it just stop there?
It does. Well, he doesn't have that many safeties in the top 100. But also you have to factor in, again, like, is Corey Giddings working off the same numerical scale as these other guys? Because they have like 10 interior offensive linemen in the first top 100. But I love the Javon Holland hype. People are going to forget about him. I do think people are forgetting about him because he opted out of 2020.
I haven't forgotten. Never forget.
Where is he on your board?
50.
50? I love that. Like that. Love that. Let's keep him there. Well, that's going to do it for the Bleacher Report rankings. Let's go ahead and dive into that article you did. We're going to work to get Nate Tice on the podcast. Let's work to get Justice Mosqueda on the podcast. We have little tease of the Thursday episode, or no, Monday episode. Bucky Brooks of NFL Network. First time we've talked to Bucky.
Hey, Bucky.
Bucky has had some arguments with you on Twitter. I'm excited to have some discourse. I'm excited to talk about his process, but should be a good time to have Bucky Brooks on the podcast. Shout out producer Dave for getting him on the show.
Bucky Brooks, all-time voice.
All-time voice. Dude, has that guy from
We're going to talk about that.
Move the Six podcast, which is with Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks. Encourage you guys to listen. His voice is incredible. It is like notable and impactful on your ears. All right, unlike mine. Jumping to your article here. So talk to me about what went into your process about identifying the biggest draft mistake and biggest success for each team for the past 5 years.
The process was I looked through all their draft picks and then I decided.
Cool. That's a very cool process.
It was, I mean, that's what.
In depth.
It was. I mean, it was actually a very interesting exercise. I'd recommend if you really are a fan to just go back and look at some of what you consider, the best teams in the NFL, the draft history, and what they look like, and some of what you consider the worst teams in the NFL. And I think it's very indicative that the draft is not only a this year decision. A lot of the best teams or teams that were like in the Super Bowl hunt, like the Eagles when they won it, that talent was acquired in the early 2010s, the vast majority of that. Now they made the play and got Carson Wentz. That ended up, getting them in the position to where they could have, Nick Foles save them on a Super Bowl run. But like that was where it was built because, again, the draft is not just a 1-2 year decision. It's not just I have a need right now, so I'm going to fill it. Like we'll get to with the Jacksonville Jaguars when they thought they were on the precipice of winning a championship. It's if I hit on this guy wholesale and he's a cornerstone, that's a decade of that guy on my team. That, like the Julio Joneses of the world, when you really hit on a guy like that, they don't go to free agency. They stay around.
Yeah.
So,
all right, starting with the Arizona Cardinals.
That's how you got to think about the approach to draft. Like a Penei Sewell. I just drafted Austin Jackson this year. I just drafted Robert Hunt. I got my 2 tackles. That's a decade decision. Penei Sewell. He's the next decade of your franchise. It doesn't have to be. And even if you don't feel like resigning him, year 4 comes around, you're getting 2 first-round picks for Sewell, like the Laramie Tunsil deal. That's how you got to think about the draft and the value you can get.
You put these in alphabetical order. Starting with the Arizona Cardinals, your note here for the worst mistake was too many athletic projects.
Yeah, and the one that really kind of stands out as decadent was they went Brandon Williams, I think in the 2nd round, who had just changed from running back to cornerback and wasn't good at cornerback, but they're like, this guy falling in love with him and he didn't do shit. I remember he got thrown to the Wolves year 1 and then almost never really made it back into the rotation. The Hassan Reddick, Robert Nkemdiche, Chad Williams, they went in on these upside guys, and those are the sort of the stories you don't hear about in the upside.
What about biggest draft success for Cardinals?
Biggest draft success for the Cardinals was the Josh Rosen decision to trade him, to move on from him. I think that was the play that was almost unprecedented at the time. To say, we just drafted a guy in the top 10. Everyone was assuming they would do the Mariota, which was Titans just drafted Mariota. They were the ones that traded out of, I believe, the number 1 overall pick for the Rams that year afterwards. Everyone just assumed that was the case. No, have some cojones, which is what they did. And their franchise is a much, much better situation because of it.
Absolutely. I mean, that would have been an absurd decision to be drafting number 1 overall with Josh Rosen, coming off one of the worst seasons we've seen from a rookie quarterback over the past decade plus, and have Kyler Murray in your lap. And a coach in Cliff Kingsbury that could win with him, or was believed to be able to win with him. I have my doubts now, but that would have been absurd if they moved on and didn't draft Kyler Murray. Can you imagine if they were still trying to kick the tires on Rosen, like the Jets potentially will be doing with Sam Darnold? That would be. I mean, that sets your franchise back so many years. You have biggest draft mistake for the Atlanta Falcons, offensive line desperation in 2019.
Yeah, I think it was letting, and this was kind of like a free agency mistake and a team building mistake prior to that. But letting it get so desperate that they pigeonholed themselves into 2 offensive linemen, and by pretty much every account reached on 2 linemen in Chris Lindstrom and Caleb McGarry in that draft. And then, as rookie offensive linemen tend to do, didn't fix their offensive line problems right away. Now, in the future, I think Lindstrom looks like he's going to be a solid guard going forward. McGarry, jury's still out. But that is the typical progression. What we saw from last year's offensive line class is not the typical progression for offensive linemen. It is year 3, year 4 that you finally get a starting caliber offensive lineman. So invest in that before you need it. And I think that was their biggest weakness, was they for years kind of chased that. Was it the 2016 season when they went to the Super Bowl? They were chasing that sort of with the contracts they were signing, with the way they were drafting. And all of a sudden it led to them. It was the 2017 season. It was 2016. It led to them being so desperate that they had to do it. And that was kind of the downfall of the Dimitrov era.
What about biggest success?
I think the biggest success, you go back to that 2016 draft. And they needed the linebacker for the Dan Quinn cover 3, and they needed the box safety for the Dan Quinn cover 3. Staring at them in the face at number 17 overall, Darren Lee, athletic linebacker, pretty much universally agreed upon by everyone except us here at PFF as probably the top linebacker in that draft class. No, they went Keanu Neal that year. And in the second round, they go Deion Jones. Instead of, they could have gone opposite way, like I said, gone Darren Lee, Sua Cravens in the second round was the safety picked right after, where the Atlanta Falcons went. Both, a box safety and a linebacker that they could have needed, both, similarly touted. They picked to go with. Now, Keanu Neal's career got sidetracked due to injury, but damn, he was good at the start of his career. He was that box safety, that guy that you want in that defense. And Deion Jones, obviously, one of the best coverage linebackers in the NFL.
Baltimore Ravens, I think this is very apt. Easy. Wide receiver evaluations. Chris Moore in the 4th round in 2016. Jaleel Scott in the 4th in 2018. Jordan Lasley of UCLA in the 5th in 2018. Marquise Brown in 2019. Miles Boykin, 3rd in 2019. Duvernay, Prochet. It's been a grind.
I respect the commitment to throwing resources.
Absolutely.
The evals, though, have been sus.
Isn't sus like a Zoomer thing? Is Zoomer a generation? I don't know. Anyway, yeah, they have been sus.
But it's been all right because the Lamar Jackson draft pick was obviously their best one. And I don't want to say I hate people that want to really bring up the fact that they drafted a tight end before him. Hate's the wrong word. What's the word? The people that always say, oh, but they drafted the tight end. It's like, yeah, but then no one else drafted Lamar Jackson. They traded up to go get Lamar Jackson when no one else wanted him. They're the Russell Wilson thing. If they knew Russell Wilson was going to be that, well, all you have to be is higher than everyone else on him. And that's having that consistent edge leads to better results in the long run. They believe in Lamar Jackson more than anyone else. And it's led to a lot of success the past couple years.
Yep. Buffalo Bills, obviously the biggest success being the Lamar Jackson pick for the Baltimore Ravens. Buffalo Bills' biggest mistake, running back addiction.
Man, think about if they, one, never traded away Wyatt Teller. 2, if they had just gone guards 3rd round the last couple of years instead of Devin Singletary and Zach Moss, they would have been in a much better situation. Like they didn't even try to give the ball to those guys against the Chiefs this past year in the NFC.
Rightfully so, though. That was the right decision, but it's like, don't spend that capital on running backs.
Because again, it comes back to what we say. You got a bad running game, you want to fix your running game, draft offensive lineman.
And biggest success for the Bills, Josh Allen?
Easily. I mean, and I don't think they get enough credit for, they traded up. They were at 12. They gave up 2 second-round picks that year to go up, which is a hefty price to pay, to go from 12 to 7, to give up pick 53 and pick 56 like they did to get Josh Allen. Now, a couple years of struggling, to say the least, objectively not good quarterback play before it paid off. And I think it's going to, and again, it's not a 2 or 3 year decision. When you are making these things at the top of the draft, you should be looking for the next decade of your franchise. That's going to impact the next decade of your franchise.
Carolina Panthers, worst mistake, anything after the 2nd round. That is brutal.
Yeah, they just haven't gotten anyone after round 2. Now, Marty Hurney was fairly solid in terms of evaluating talent early on. I don't think they have any real big swings and misses in his era there, but they really haven't. Corn Elder has been their most profitable, shall we say, non-pick after 2nd round, 68.5 grade this past season on 411 snaps. That's your best pick. So.
Corn Elder, actually, fun fact, was one of the first prospects I ever interviewed. And it was back when I was in college. He was when he was with the Miami Hurricanes. He was also the guy that ran back that special teams kick, I think, against Duke or something, like a big return to win the game. I don't remember exactly, but I talked to him about it.
The one where he was maybe down.
Yeah.
Lateral. I remember that.
Yeah, he was the guy. He talked about that play. It was pretty
also
cool.
To shorten Cornelius, which is his full name, to Corn. I always respected that.
It's fire.
Like to shorten it to, like, you probably get cob of corn. It's objectively not a super cool thing to be associated with, but Corn rocks it.
He owns it. Chicago Bears, or no, biggest success of the Panthers?
Oh, their second round steals. They've been exceptional drafting in the second round, whether it was Jeremy Chin this past season or the name's eluding me, and who else they got in the second round here. 1 second, I gotta look it up.
All right, look it up. What are you talking? I think Jeremy Chin, though, he didn't like grade as like expected for people. People were expecting him to grade as like one of the best safeties in the NFL because he was making a ton of plays. He had the 2, I think, defensive touchdowns in one game. But still, like, you saw a lot of bright spots for a player that was playing bad competition a year prior, didn't have an offseason to prepare for the NFL, and still like already hit the ground running.
James Bradbury, Taylor Mouton. I'd throw Curtis Samuel in there. He was good for a second round pick, I still believe. Dante Jackson. Greg Little, probably your only whiff there so far.
Man, but to get that is quite the list in the second round.
That's a good list for a second round.
Absolutely. All right, Chicago Bears. I love how you put this. Do I have to say it?
Trading
up from 3 to 2 to get Mitchell Trubisky was the biggest mistake with the Chicago Bears.
The 3 to 2 is always just like the chef's kiss.
Yeah, it is.
How disastrous. It's like you moved up a spot with the team who wasn't going to pick Trubisky.
And they ended up picking Solomon Thomas, right?
And you would rather them have picked Mitch Trubisky in front of you. It would have saved you a lot of heartache, Bears fans. I'm sorry.
What about the biggest success?
Biggest success was they've given away a lot of draft picks, but they've low-key added some good talent in the late rounds, whether it's Darnell Mooney this past year in the 5th round, whether it's Bilal Nichols in the 5th round a few years ago, Eddie Jackson in the 4th round, Tariq Cohen in the 4th round. They've been solid in the later rounds, where adding talent like that, not a lot of teams do. Like we just said about the Panthers, no one after the second round. That's a rarity.
Cincinnati Bengals, biggest mistake, and I think this one's obvious as well, is John Ross at number 9 in 2017. That's led to a lot of different, like, Bengals, trying to fit him into the offense and these different things. That has negatively impacted them for the past 3 or 4 years.
Really, really sad that Quinn couldn't be here.
Yeah, I know. Wish Quinn could have a comment on this one.
But the thing I always like look back at and just die laughing about is Marvin Lewis wanted to switch him to cornerback as a rookie. That's when you should have just known it's over.
Yeah, that was cut him then.
If you're going to switch your top 10 pick, who's a wide receiver, to cornerback, he's dead in the water.
Yeah.
And we'll see if someone signs him this offseason in free agency, because I hope not, just for the story. That's an all-timer that we could tell about him.
Yeah, we'll get there. Best decision for the Bengals?
Jesse Bates, man. They haven't had a ton of overarching success at certain positions, but getting Jesse Bates, when I think he came off the board as safety 3 in that draft class back in 2018 at 54 overall, you would have been hard pressed to see a lot of people evaluating Jesse Bates as that highly in that draft class. And they made the play, and now he's arguably the best safety in the NFL when Derwin James is out.
Yeah, and I think he's going to get paid like the best safety in the NFL here pretty soon. I think the Bengals would be smart to give him a contract extension. Everything I've heard,
Terrell Edmonds got drafted before him.
Yeah, that's bonkers.
Yeah.
Farcical, maybe. I think the other thing, too, is that from everything I've heard with people who've been in the locker room for Cincinnati, is like he's a big vocal leader, big team leader in that room. I do think that he's going to stick around in Cincinnati for quite some time. Cleveland Browns, biggest mistake, 2016.
Yes, that was such a bad draft, man. That was like, and we'll get to their biggest sort of best decision, but 2016, the evaluation aspect of the 2016 draft was ass. Corey Coleman at 15, Emmanuel Ogbah at 32, Carl Nassib, 65, Sean Coleman at 76, Cody Kessler. Those guys, Emmanuel Ogbah, I think, is now starting and is maybe like a competent starter. Those other guys aren't. Joe Schobert at 99, our boy Joe Schobert, the one who I loved, who I got the Browns to draft, by the way, by telling Bobby Slowick how good he was. And his brother was the linebackers coach of the Browns at that time. So welcome, Browns fans, for that one, even though that's definitely not how it actually probably ended up going down. But that's the only saving grace, and I think they had like 17 picks. And I always said that the biggest mistake Sashi Brown made, in my opinion, was not investing in the secondary. Like Ogba, Nassib, those were low ceiling edge guys. Those were like, you could have taken, you had that many picks. You could have taken corner. Like you could have gone the Bucks method very soon and built yourself a good secondary. And they didn't draft, I think for 2 drafts, they drafted 1 safety in Jabril Peppers, who was like a box safety. He drafted no deep coverage players in his 2 drafts. That was my biggest gripe.
Should we move to Dallas Cowboys?
Oh, the biggest actual like good thing to come out of the Browns was the tank was the good thing. Like the actual acquiring of all that draft capital is why they went 11-5 last year.
Yeah,
made the playoffs, won a playoff game, and now have $20 million in cap space this upcoming offseason. That's why, is because, and they even spent money, some reckless money on like a Jarvis Landry contract where they did a trade and then pay a guy, which is like, we'd always push back on trades like that. They spent some recklessly from then on, but they still have $20 million of cap space and are coming off a playoff win. They're in a good spot because of the foundation.
Dallas Cowboys' worst draft decision, Ezekiel Elliott over Jalen Ramsey.
Haunter, man. This one, again, it's a decade-long decision. You had Jalen Ramsey right now. Fans feel a lot different about the Cowboys.
Plus, like I think it does matter when you draft a running back that highly, and he does, quote unquote, pan out, play well, as you'd expect for any running back to come in to that situation, drafted that highly, then you almost feel like obligated to pay him while he's vacationing in Cabo. You know, like they paid him a ton of money to play running back for the Dallas Cowboys. And any running back, I think the New York Giants are going to be in a very similar situation. Like the New York Giants are likely going to break the bank for Saquon Barkley. And he's a very good player, arguably the best running back in the NFL when fully healthy. But hitting your cap that hard for a running back is very difficult to overcome, as the Dallas Cowboys are currently trying to do when they had one of the worst defenses we've ever seen and let Byron Jones walk out the door.
Yep. And even if, worst case of the Jalen Ramsey, like it didn't work out in Jacksonville, they got 2 first-round picks in return. It still worked out for them in Jacksonville.
And best decision?
The best decision, I think, has been their wide receiver scouting. Or wait, was Dak in that one?
Was Dak not 2016?
Oh, my bad. It's Dak Prescott.
Okay.
Oops.
Definitely think Dak Prescott's been...
Quite easily. 135 overall. One of 4, like you said, over the past decade. One of 4 guys drafted outside the first round to turn into legitimate starters. You got Russell Wilson. You got Kirk Cousins. You got Derek Carr. And you got Dak Prescott.
Andy Dalton.
You got Dak Prescott. So...
we need Quinn back.
That one truly was even if, again, everyone likes to bring up, they like Connor Cook more. Well, they were high on Dak Prescott than everyone else.
Yeah. Denver Broncos, biggest mistake, the quarterback position. Paxton Lynch, Chad Kelly, Drew Lock.
Yeah, and it goes back to the not making the play, not getting your guy. I find it hard to believe that Paxton Lynch in that draft class was their guy. Maybe he was. I don't know. But the teams that we see that are going to be on this best list of best decisions, they went up and got it. Josh Allen, Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes. They went up. Lamar Jackson even went up and got their guy. They stood pat for Paxton Lynch. That's in the second round for Drew Lock. Like that, they got the also-rans. They got the guys that were picked over. So that's why we say in this draft, you're in a spot, go get your guy, Denver Broncos.
And best decision for the Broncos?
Justin Simmons.
Yeah.
98 overall in 2016. Not a spot where you think you're going to be getting an all-pro caliber safety.
I mean, and a guy that could be walking this offseason. I think they're going to tag him ultimately. Yeah,
there's no chance they don't take him. Like the safety tag is a joke right now.
Oh yeah, it's one of the lowest paid positions in the NFL.
$13 million is what's going to cost to tag him.
Nothing.
It's a joke.
Detroit Lions, biggest mistake, positional value. I think you had a tweet recently like where they're just like complete disregard for drafting positions of high value.
It's been tough for Lions fans. I have a buddy who's a Lions fan, and this past year was the first time he's like, okay, like we started drafting, actual positions that can make an impact on the football field. But they had 9 top 50 picks from 2016 to now. 2 of them are running backs. 2 of them were linebackers. One being Jelani Tavai at linebacker, who's a 2-down linebacker, I would just say. Basically the running back of linebackers. A center, a tight end, a nose tackle, and then 1 OT and 1 cornerback. Two positions out of 9 that we would say are valuable positions.
But the NFL would say valuable positions. You know,
yes,
again, it's like the NFL. I tweeted that out a couple days ago. It's like
yeah.
The NFL values quarterbacks, pass rushers, and then offensive tackles, wide receivers as the most valuable positions in the NFL, as evidenced by how much they fucking pay them.
Yeah.
It's not like this mythical spreadsheet analysis of what positions are valuable. Like, no, this is how much they cost. Yeah. This is how much they cost when you franchise tag them. This is their average market value. They are the literal valuable positions. You aren't drafting them in the first round. If you aren't drafting those valuable positions in the first round with that fixed spend that comes with rookie contracts, you're making a legitimate mistake.
And the almost tragic irony here is their best decision was Kenny Golladay, a valuable position, wide receiver at number 96 overall in 2017. That was their best decision.
Green Bay Packers' worst decision, drafting for the mythical future. I'm sure there's going to be some Jordan Love discussion here.
Yes. And it's not even the Jordan Love discussion. Honestly, that pick was their best pick of their top 3 that year. But guys who aren't going to make again, positional value, but also just guys who can make an impact on the football field for a team that's good. We talk about drafting for your situation and knowing where you are. And again, it's not saying it can't be this decade decision. That's why I don't really hate the Jordan Love pick. But a guy that can make an impact in the second round for a decade on your team is not A.J. Dillon. The fullback that you draft in the 3rd round is not making an impact for a decade on your team. Best case scenario, you're paying them $8 million to $10 million in their second contracts.
And that's the best case? That's also one of the worst cases.
So that's why it was just a complete misread of where they were.
Biggest success for the Green Bay Packers.
The 2018 fleecing that they pulled off in the first round. Now, I still am a little salty that they didn't get Derwin James because he fell to them. I never thought he'd fell to them.
Everyone that passed on Derwin James, any fan, is salty.
I'm salty. But they got the second best player in that draft, positional-wise. So I'm not that salty. 14 overall, sitting at 14 overall. They trade back to, I believe it was 27 with the New Orleans Saints and get another first-round pick in return. Go back up for, I believe it was a 3rd, to go back up and get Jair Alexander. Then that first-round pick from the next year turned into Darnell Savage. You revamped your entire secondary with one trade.
2 valuable
2 trades, but one fleecing of a trade. And that first-round pick that the Saints traded up for turned to Marcus Davenport, who, good player, not with 2 first-round picks.
No. Very hard when you're trading up, and we talk about this all the time, when Mickey Loomis, an aggressive GM, is trading up multiple picks to go get a non-quarterback. It's very hard to get that value back in return. Because as good as Marcus Davenport could be, and he has not been even probably top 10 at his position in the NFL, it's going to be very difficult to be more valuable than 2 players, 2 first-round players. How do you even do that? Literally, how do you do that? So it would be tough. All right, biggest mistake for the Texans, Laramie Tunsil trade, and then forcing themselves into the similar to the Atlanta Falcons we spoke to recently, forcing them into needing offensive linemen when they drafted the guy out of Northern Illinois, Max Sharping, I think was what his name was, and then the other
Titus Howard was first round, then Sharping was second round.
Titus Howard in the first, and then Max Sharping in the second because they needed offensive line help, and now those guys, both projects at each position, have been moved around up and down that offensive line, and they've never really been able to come back from that Laramie Tunsil trade. So much that their starting quarterback Deshaun Watson wants out. He has been hit the most, combination of sacks and hits, than any quarterback of the past 3 years.
Yeah.
And I think the Laramie Tunsil trade is a big reason why.
Here are the picks that they've had in the first 2 rounds since the Deshaun Watson trade, and then the Laramie Tunsil trade. They had Titus Howard, Lonnie Johnson, Max Sharping, and Ross Blacklock. Those guys haven't made a fucking bit of impact for the Texans. That's how you go in the toilet, is when you're not getting anything from your first and second round picks.
That's how you win 4 games with a top 5 quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah.
What's the best decision?
Getting that top 5 quarterback in the NFL. Now, the Deshaun Watson trade, again, they made the play.
Got aggressive.
And they were in the 20s, 25 or so. I can't remember off the top of my head. They were in the 20s, and it kind of knew everyone's people were mocking Deshaun Watson falling to them before, I remember, in that year. But again, getting aggressive and doing it, like, that changed their franchise from there. And then they, the decisions after that also changed the franchise. But they still have the most valuable asset in the NFL right now in Deshaun Watson.
I think teams could afford to get even more aggressive at the quarterback position when trading up and those things. I think there's, you talk about teams that are drafting after 16, 17. It's like, oh, they probably don't have the horses to move up. It's like, find a way, dude. Find a way to go. If you don't have a good quarterback, find a way to go try and get one. Being in this bridge quarterback, he's kind of good situation is the worst situation in the NFL.
Because also the cap space that you get from the young quarterback is 3 quality starters in free agency.
Yes.
So if you gave up 3 picks for it to go get that guy, you'd have to hit on all 3 of those picks to basically say that it's not worth it.
Indianapolis Colts, biggest mistake for them, edge evaluation.
Yeah. And they've fallen trapped to the non-day 2 edges or non-day 1 edges, which we keep saying they don't last outside the top 30 to 40 picks. The NFL can evaluate talent at that position.
It's the second highest paid position in the NFL. You look at, I remember I tweeted that out recently. I think it's like 11 or 12 of the top 15 paid players that aren't quarterbacks are edge rushers.
And when they don't hit free agency, so it's teams want them highly, and the years and athletic and physical skill set that translates. And the guys they've drafted have kind of had that, but the Kermoko Toure, Tyquan Lewis, Ben Banogu, Terrell Basham, they've thrown these resources at that position, but that's not where I would be throwing the resources. And some of that's because of their draft strategies. They trade down. They're getting these picks on day 2. But edge talent, and I think they kind of realized it with the DeForest Buckner trade, that true difference makers along the defensive line the NFL knows.
The jury
DeForest
is
Buckner
out.
was top 10, and everyone kind of could tell, that guy can ball. He'll be good in the NFL. And so they traded the first rounder for him, but that's definitely their worst.
Even when talking to Dr. Eric Eager, who is a data analyst and I think the vice president of research and development here at PFF, he talks about edge as one of the more stable, predictive positions going from college to pro because of how predictive measurements, athleticism, and those things are for pass rushers. Like pass rushers with length, explosiveness, and bend, and the 3-cone speaks to that, are the ones that play well in the NFL. And those are the ones that it's very easy to see them going in early in the first round. Like if you clock good times in the 40, 10-yard split, good jumps, vertical and broad, and then also burn a 3-cone, you're going to be valued highly because those guys tend to have success in the NFL. Even a guy that we were lower on that is this athletic freak, Rashawn Gary, has started to pan out. Started to play better at least of late, maybe better than we expected down the stretch here. What's the best decision for the Colts?
It's the trade backs. They've acquired so much value from consistently trading back, consistently gaining more picks. They've drafted over in 5 years 46 guys. You're allotted 7 a year. That would be 35 over that span.
Wow.
They have 11 more picks than they were allotted, OG allotted. So that's how you build a young, talented defense that is now still top 10 in cap space, or top 5 in cap space in the NFL.
Jacksonville Jaguars, worst decision, regular season Lenny, like how you phrased that. Lombardi Lenny's a different story. Getting him off the street and signing him and seeing the success he had was awesome for Tampa Bay. Drafting him at 4 overall was probably never a good decision. Yeah,
it's funny because their best decision, 2016, just a true all-timer over not just this span, but NFL history and the talent they added, and Jalen Ramsey, Myles Jack, Yannick Ngakoue, easily might be their best decision was that draft. 2017, they go Leonard Fournette, Cam Robinson, Dwayne Smoot. And I think that was the year they hired Coughlin. And this was the tone setter draft. And this was what they thought was going to get them because again, they were the team that didn't have the quarterback, or they had the middling quarterback in Blake Bortles at the time that they were trying to build around him to try to put lipstick on the pig sort of thing. And it was also, I remember that whole draft, 2017 pre-draft, everyone's like, they don't really have a need at 4. Who are they going to pick? Running back's their only need on the roster because they had signed all these free agents. And I was like, draft Marshawn fucking Lattimore. You have AJ Bouye. You have Jalen Ramsey. If you put Marshawn Lattimore in the slot, they might be Super Bowl champions right now. If they had drafted Marshawn Lattimore, they would have had an all-time defense. No one would have passed on them.
And what about?
But then they drafted Leonard Fournette.
Yeah, Kansas City Chiefs. And you mentioned best decision there.
Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, best decision. Patrick Mahomes trade.
Yeah.
Again. And another unprecedented type of move where
they came up from the 20s.
They were in the playoffs the year before
with Alex Smith. They could have easily been complacent
for a quarterback that they traded for before that. They could have been just said, build around him, one more piece. That's what gets us over the hump. Patrick Mahomes, which got you over the hump. They have a much worse roster now than they had back then, in terms of complete talent. They had a better roster back in 2016 season before they drafted Patrick Mahomes. Weren't as good.
Yeah,
because
Tamba Hali, Derek Johnson, Marcus Peters, I think was on that team. But the worst decision, and I think this one's obvious, Frank Clark trade. Not only did they trade multiple picks, including
a first and a second.
First and a second for Frank Clark. And then this season, the 3 highest paid non-quarterbacks in the NFL this season, Aaron Donald, Khalil Mack, Frank Clark. Paying him that much money, putting him on that. You traded a first and a second round pick to give yourself the opportunity to put him on this type of deal, forcing him to have to pan out and to be one of the top 3 defensive players in the NFL, and he has just not been that.
And that was the year that some legitimate edge talent hit free agency. You had Trey Flowers in free agency. You had Darius Smith in free agency. You had guys who could rush the passer hitting free agency. And they decided to give up 2 picks to get a guy who was good in Seattle, was okay his first year, was not actually good at all this past year for the Chiefs. But and so people always say, oh, but they won the Super Bowl, justifies it. It's they could have won the Super Bowl this year if they had Darius Smith and a first and a second round pick that could also make an impact on that roster. It doesn't justify just one Super Bowl. It doesn't justify every decision made before that. It doesn't mean that the Breland Speaks pick was great. It doesn't mean that Sammy Watkins signing was great because he had a couple catches in that Super Bowl. It's that if you evaluate the decision and that money could have been used on much more, the other options at the time were better for you going forward.
I'm really happy with how you structured this. I'm glad you to speak to I know you said the process was looking at their draft, but how you structure it to actual overarching thematic decisions, not necessarily this player and this. Frank Clark's a little bit different, but going to Las Vegas Raiders, worst decision here. Las Vegas Raiders, character over talent, and I think that was coming with the Mike Mayock decision. Bringing in Mike Mayock, and he spoke to that in that process. Bringing in Clelin Ferrell, who was a leader on a very successful team. Obviously, Jonathan Abram, who was that tone setter on the back end. And I think there's also character over talent. You have it listed in the thing. It's character over talent and positional value, because they've also had some disregard for that in Jonathan Abram. Obviously, Josh Jacobs coming in. I think that's been some concern for me as well for the Raiders.
It's funny to me. I've seen Raiders fans being just imagine when Josh Jacobs plays like he did, in 2019, how good this offense will be. It's well, they were a lot better offensively this past year than in 2019. So his impact, you don't want him getting more touches. His impact obviously wasn't how the offense came and went. It was the passing game and what they could do in that regard. So, but it
was Nelson Aguilar. Nelson Aguilar was a more valuable player to the Raiders in 2020 than Josh Jacobs was. Full stop. Don't quote graphic that, because I don't want Raiders fans killing me, but that's fact. I do think Nelson Aguilar was a bigger part of this team in 2020.
But the 2019 draft, 44 picks in the top 40, and you came away with not one impact starter yet. 2 years in,
and those picks, read those out.
Clelin Ferrell, Josh Jacobs, Jonathan Abram, and Trayvon Mullen. That was what you came away with. And it's just, that's why the defense is what the defense is.
Yeah. I mean, that's another one too, where that John Gruden quote where good pass rushers are hard to find. They've tried. Clelin Ferrell, Max Crosby, Arden Key, Maurice Hurst, they've tried, but when you're not spending, they did spend a first round pick on Clelin Ferrell, but Brian Burns was available, Josh Allen was available.
Oh man, they're I can see Brian Burns was a different type of player, but their decision for Ferrell over Allen, a high character guy by all.
Oh,
accounts.
Absolutely. Guy who went through a ton of struggles as a kid and really high character guy.
Was that they thought Ferrell could be a better 6 tech. That was what I remember. He could play better head up and tight ends. When the only Ferrell and Allen were almost identical in terms of size, height. I think Furl had a half-inch longer arms. Was the only difference.
And Clelin Ferrell, to his credit, has played a lot better of late. Yeah, and I think he's played really well against the run.
Like, we had him in, like, the 30s in that draft. Like, we thought he was good. We just, like, there was nothing about him to use the number 4 overall pick on him. When, again, that's a lottery ticket that can pay off in a big way.
That's another thing I'll add to the Raiders' decision-making process, too, is that we've consistently seen them overdraft compared to consensus boards. Like with Colton Miller, Damon Arnett, Clelin Ferrell. You're looking at a lot of those picks were up there, top 5, top 10 biggest reaches. Reach is obviously subjective, but according to consensus boards that factor in multiple analysts. Like, I do think that they've been, this is our guy, and we are getting our guy. Like, they've always, I think, been really privy to that method of drafting. What is their best decision?
It's the Maurice Hurst. They took advantage of whatever that slide was from Maurice Hurst. Pass rushing grades in the high 70s the last 2 years. I still don't use him as an every down player. We'll see if that changes in a new scheme here, but he's been good, like, situational pass rusher on the interior. He's been their best for sure. So
yeah.
Los Angeles pick 140 is you don't get that every year.
Los Angeles Chargers, the offensive line being their worst mistake. I mean, they have not been able to find it there. Max Turk in the 3rd round, 2016. Donovan Clark in the 7th in 2016. Forrest Lamp in the 2nd in 2017. Feeney in the 3rd. Dan Feeney in 2017. Sam Tevy in the 6th in 2017. Scott Quessenberry, 5th, 2018. Trey Pipkins, 3rd, 2019. They have not been able to find it. They have not been able to find offensive linemen. And no, none of those picks were first rounders. Highest picked player there was Forrest Lamp in the 2nd, but none of them have panned out to be successful. Some of them have started, but I don't necessarily think starting is a badge of honor for this group here.
Yeah, I still can't believe Forrest Lamp. I really liked him coming out. The ACL right away kind of just started him down a bad path, but man, they've all whiffs, like not a single, like Tevy out. I guess Tevy for a 6th rounder has outplayed what you'd expect from a 6th rounder, but that's the best thing you can say about their offensive line drafting.
Yeah. What about best decision?
Best decision was the Herbert. I mean, wholesale to stand pat, and we talked about every other guy, the quarterback. They went up and got these guys. Stand pat and get Herbert. Quarterback 3 in the draft. 2 other teams evaluated quarterback position, did not have Herbert as the top guy. Is a dub. And again, it's going to pay off big dividends for decade plus.
Where was Justin Herbert on PFS draft board overall? In the 20s?
He was in the 20s, yes. Let me go take a look.
But the reason I asked is someone reached out and said, what's the biggest reason you think Justin Herbert and others, or no, companies and others missed on Justin Herbert? And it's like, did you never think he was going to be good? And I think the response I had to this guy who was sending me a message was like, we thought Justin Herbert could be good. We just didn't have the percentage chance he was this good this early as likely as it was, because obviously he did it as a rookie without an offseason, without a preseason, all these things. Like we said, Justin Herbert has the physical traits, the tools, the ability to be a damn good quarterback in the NFL. Yeah. I just think our conception of how likely that was, I think was lower than what it actually was.
Yeah, so he was 30th on the draft board, and it was also... What was the high end for Herbert? Was what in my head was like worrisome, because he kind of he shrunk in a lot of big situations back in college. That was kind of his MO. And that was when everyone was championing him for the Pac-12 title game and the Wisconsin Bowl game for his play down the stretch, because that was like a new thing we had seen from him, because all the other big games throughout his career kind of came up flat. But even like in those, you watch him as a passer, and it wasn't winning as a passer. I think he had fewer than 200 yards in both those games. It was more with his legs in both those. So that was the biggest thing with me. It was like showing up in big games. He was not his thing over the course of his college career. Still TBD in the NFL.
Buddy, I hate to derail this segment. I really do. But Chris Sims just dropped his 2021 quarterback rankings. And can I just read them to you? Can we just talk about this, please? Zach Wilson 1. Mm-hmm. Trevor Lawrence 2.
Okay.
Mac Jones 3. Kellen Mond 4. Justin Fields 5. Trey Lance 6.
Interesting.
Zach Wilson ahead of Trevor Lawrence is obviously a big one, but I mean, at least we value those players as top 3 players in the draft, top 2 players in the draft. To have Mac Jones ahead of Fields and Lance, this is the first I've seen it. To have Kellen Mond in the conversation and ahead of Justin Fields and Trey Lance, I mean, we got to get him on the pod or something. So this is process we haven't seen. These are results. This is evaluation we just have not seen.
Yeah, I'd like to hear an explanation.
I'd like to get Kurt Warner's take. Again, we just talked about not being condescending, not being rude, but that is an opinion similar to some of the stuff we saw in the Bleacher Report rankings, where it's like, this is very different to how the consensus sees this quarterback class. Would love to hear your process here.
Yeah. I have no take until I hear the process.
Jim Nagy invited Kellen Mond to the Senior Bowl and loves his guys down there in Mobile. I don't think he has Kellen Mond over Lance and Justin Fields. I'll say that right now.
It's probably true.
That is wild. That is wild, to say the least. Let's get back to the segment here. I had to bring it up. I just saw it on the timeline. Someone's got to talk about it.
Yeah.
Los Angeles Rams, their worst decision over the past 5 years. 7 years of bad luck.
7 years without a first round pick, they're going to go. And
that's not bad luck.
It's gonna be turned.
That's not 7 years bad luck. That is bad decision making, right? Or at least that's not luck. That's like forced circumstance.
7 years bad luck.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Jesus.
I hate myself. I'm not good with idioms and sayings.
Yeah. Well, it's an idiom. You're an idiom. But it's 7 years without a first round pick. It's kind of coming back already. They're not going to be able to retain Leonard Floyd, Troy Hill, John Johnson this offseason. They're going to have to make some cuts to even get under the cap. They're kind of done adding to this roster. And in the NFL, as we've seen, if you're not adding, usually things go worse. Like, I don't think you can bank on Aaron Donald being Aaron Donald for that much longer. He's going to fall off to a degree. He's not going to be that unstoppable force for the next 3 or 4 years.
Best decision was Aaron Donald.
Donald was 14.
Oh, no. What's the best decision over the past 5 years?
Best decision over the past 5 years was the trades they made before the 2017 season. 18 season? Whatever the one that they went to Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
God damn, I should know this. Which one was it? So, they traded for Aqib Talib and Marcus Peters one offseason. Got themselves a secondary overnight. The reason why they went to the Super Bowl was the 2018 season. The reason they went to the Super Bowl that year and fucking should have won if the offense wouldn't have pooped the bed.
Yeah.
Because you built a secondary overnight without a first round pick, mind you. That's like, we'll get on board if you're not giving up those valuable draft picks in the first round. By all means, I'll get on board with flipping a 2 for Marcus Peters. Flipping I think it was like a 4 or 5 for Aqib Talib. That was their master.
Talk about an all-time shit-talking defense. Yeah. Peters and Talib would get in your dome and stay there, set up camp, build a fire. And receivers, man, talking to a lot of draft prospects, pass rushers, offensive tackles, receivers, and corners, I feel like there's this one-on-one, there's this like game within a game with those positions where like getting into the mental side of it is important. Like you can break a guy's will with how you talk shit about a guy, which is interesting. But
it works in Beard Eye too.
Huh? Works in Beard Eye too. I swear to God, it does. The other thing I wanted to mention about the Los Angeles Rams is like, don't you think that obviously this was draft decision, but the best front office decision the Los Angeles Rams have made in recent years is Sean McVay. Like he has like propped up Jared Goff and taken this offense to legitimacy, similar to what Kyle Shanahan has done in San Francisco with what I would argue is not a top 10, top 15 quarterback in Jimmy G. And coaching salaries don't count against the cap. Like they are arguably very valuable if you can get it. It's a good gig if you can get it. If you can get a coach that can have the success with mid-tier quarterbacks that McVay and Shanahan are capable of, that is huge. That helps you out a ton. Also, they do a really good job of bringing in coordinators and delegating. You've seen that with Brandon Staley in the Los Angeles Rams. Obviously, Robert Saleh, the San Francisco 49ers.
Yeah.
Those are very, very good coaches that have done a lot of good things on the football field. I think Bill Belichick gets brought up a ton.
When you are when you are a quality football mind, I feel like you can identify other quality football minds. You're like, this defense is fucking tough.
It's a big reason why they hired Zach Robinson, former PFF analyst.
Exactly.
Who's now their wide receivers coach.
Bobby Slowick, former PFF analyst, works for those two.
Nice. Miami Dolphins, worst decision, ignoring the offensive line and then just throwing the kitchen sink at it this past year.
Yeah. So between 2016 and 2019, the only guys they drafted before the 5th, I want to say, on the offensive line were Laramie Tunsil and Michael Dieter. And it wasn't that good before that, man. Like it had been bad pretty much that entire span. Went elsewhere. And then again, they kind of had that panic draft of, oh shit, we got our new franchise quarterback. We have to now protect him. Every other pick after that's got to be offensive line. And, Kinley, Jackson, they struggled. Hunt was all right, but like they didn't solve it right away because that's not how the vast majority of offensive line works. So you got to draft him before you need him, and they kind of just didn't. And now they're reeling to try to figure out what to do. But it also is their and the thing is their best pick over that span was the Laramie Tunsil pick. Like that was their best pick. They got a top tier left tackle at 13 because of a gas mask bong video that was released by his stepfather, right? On draft day.
Yeah.
An all-time draft slide move. Good Lord.
That's on me.
And then they flip him into 2 first-round picks that can now rebuild their offensive line. That was a hell of a play. It's about as good of a first-round pick at non-quarterback as you can make.
Jumping now to the phone call I just got. No, just kidding. Minnesota Vikings, worst decision they've made. Garrett Bradbury at number 18 in 2019.
And this one's because it's going to keep... One, they had a center on the route. Pat Elflein was a fine center. And they drafted Bradbury because they were moving to an outside zone scheme. He was the best, quote-unquote outside zone center in the draft. And so they thought they could move Elflein to guard. So you ruined a guy who was fine at center by flipping him to guard and making another position bad. And then Bradbury is in that zone of offensive lineman where he's too good as a run blocker to bench or replace, but he's so bad in pass protection, they still a liability. Pass protection grades of 38.8 and 41.4 his first 2 seasons. Bottom 3 in the NFL both years. I don't foresee that changing, man. Like, he was not a young prospect coming out. He was a polished, like that was his thing. But he's just he's slightly built, and he has T-Rex baby arms, and he's going up against Kenny Clark twice a year.
I mean, he is as good as he's. I mean, because I remember we coveted him coming out of NC State for his run blocking, his ability to move in zone.
And he still is. He's a very good outside zone center.
Yeah,
that's why teams fell in love with him. But we kept saying wasn't top 40 on our board because the dude's got concerns about his pass protection.
Well, what about the best decision?
Best decision was this past year. I mean, to flip Stephon Diggs for a first-round pick. And now just the 1 first-round pick was, I think, middling compensation for a talent like Diggs. I think they got boned because that was after the DeAndre Hopkins trade, right? So they got boned by DeAndre Hopkins getting nothing. And so kind of the starting point for wide receiver trades at that point was a stupid second-rounder and a running back. So they kind of got boned by that. But to then flip that for a first-rounder and get a cheaper replacement with that pick who is comparable in skill, Justin Jefferson year 1, it's a dub.
Big dub. All right, New England Patriots. We are moving through here. Only a few teams left. New England Patriots wide receivers, man. I mean, Malcolm Mitchell, Devin Lucien, Braxton Berrios, N'Keal Harry, like they have not been able to find it at the receiver position.
Yeah, the receivers they drafted over that span have combined for 120 career catches and 1,324 career yards.
Yikes.
Big yikes. So that
Justin Jefferson hit that his first year. No, it was close though. I mean, I think he had 1,400 yards. I don't think he had 120 catches.
Yeah. And flip side, they've been able to identify offensive linemen, whether it's Michael Onwenu in the 6th this past year, whether it's Yeldy Froholt. Now, he hasn't actually played, but I love Yeldy Froholt. He's going to be good. In the 4th last year, 2019. 2018, Isaiah Wynn in the 1st round, developing one of the better tackles in the NFL. And then they've just been very good. And then Joe Thuney back in the 3rd round, 2016. Like, that's quite the hit rate. And they're another team. They've invested in it. There are other guys in that list. Yadni Kajus in the 3rd wasn't great, but they've, I think, picked something like 8 guys over that span, offensive linemen, because they know that's you got to draft him before you need him. Like they drafted Yeldy Froholt, and he was not going to see the field. Had no plans of him seeing the field that year.
New Orleans Saints, worst decision. Their consistent mindset of win now, trading up, and just being aggressive in every draft.
Yeah. That's definitely their worst decision in terms of they gave up so much draft capital, like the Marcus Davenport trade. All this, they had the fewest picks of any team over the past 5 years. They've only drafted 28 players over that span. They've just consistently given up, and they have an insane hit rate. Like they have been the single best team at identifying talent, but if you had more picks and had identified them, you would not be in the situation you are, and identified talent at that same hit rate. You would not be in the situation you are now where you're going to have to cut pretty much every guy you're just going to have to move on from a lot of guys that are starters.
And so their best decision is that just like their ability to evaluate that talent?
The best decision was, that 2017 class was maybe the best draft class of all time outside of the quarterback position in terms of talent evaluation, like the guys they got, the picks they got them. It was Marshawn Lattimore, pick 11. Ryan Ramczyk at pick 32. Those are top 5 to 10 players of their respective positions. 2 of them in the first round. Marcus Williams, another top 5 to 10 safety, pick 42. Helm Kamara at 67. That's 4 for 4 right there. Alex Anzalone, pick 76. But then Trey Hendricks at 103. They got some fucking talent in that draft. That truly was an all-timer.
New York Giants. Worst decision's kind of obvious. We already spoke to this a little bit, but the Saquon Barkley decision at 2, I do think is just from a value perspective, as good as Saquon Barkley is,
does not need rehab.
When they drafted him, and I've been talking about cap a lot, but like when they drafted him, he was the top 5 highest paid running back in the NFL. Like that's, again, just complete disregard of positional value and understanding of like, he could be a great player. Mm-hmm. You are not maximizing the value of that number 2 overall pick. I'm sorry.
Yep.
What about best decision?
They have, and we kind of give Gettleman some shit for his defensive tackle addiction, but he's been good at evaluating the position. He knows the guys that work out, whether it's Dexter Lawrence, B.J. Hill. He drafted now, I think before he was there, they drafted Dalvin Tomlinson, but those are the 3 DTs they've drafted in the first 3 rounds, and all the 3 of those guys are quality DTs. So there you go.
Jumping now to the New York Jets, a year late on the quarterbacks. I think that has been definitely like rough. I mean, the Jets in the quarterback position have just not had a good time of late.
It's easy to look back and play hindsight, whatever. But 2017, they were rolling in with Josh McCown as their starter in 2017, thinking Christian Hackenberg or Bryce Petty this might be the year they turn it on. And so they passed on Patrick Mahomes and Sean Watson. Yeah, they drafted a good player, but that was a fucking bad decision in retrospect.
I mean, and they were in a position to make a similar decision at number 2, where you kind of consistently see them either mock Devontae Smith or trading down and picking up Kyle Pitts.
Yeah.
They're in a similar position where like, hey, you want to bank on this development from Sam Darnold. You're not potentially passing on the next Patrick Mahomes. I don't know if there will be a next Patrick Mahomes, but you're passing on a quarterback class that's very good.
Yeah.
Like Chris Sims' number 1 overall quarterback might be there at 2. I honestly, like, I do think that you could get a very talented quarterback prospect at 2.
Yeah.
Banking on this year's, Sam Darnold to kind of put it together would be a similar decision to trying to think that Hackenberg or Bryce Petty was going to put it together. But what's their best decision?
The best decision was ultimately maximizing that Jamal Adams trade value. Like getting 2 first-rounders for Jamal Adams when Stephon Diggs couldn't net you 2 first-rounders. When a lot of guys got moved, couldn't net, to get a guy who had been a box safety. Now, he's a little different than your average box safety and what he brings to the table. But to get 2 first-rounders for box safety is a hell of a deal for them.
Philadelphia Eagles, relying on defensive back development, worst decision over the past 5 years.
Yeah, so they had that. It was the draft where Sidney Jones, Rasul Douglas, Avonte Maddox, Jalen Mills. They had that young core that they thought, this is going to be our secondary. Like, these guys are going to develop. That's what we're going to replenish. It's going to maximize our Super Bowl window. It didn't happen. None of those guys turned out to be good at all for the Eagles, and never sort of flipped any more draft capital at that position or at those positions. And that's why their defense turned into shambles, even though defensive line never really kind of went away. Defensive line was good after the Super Bowl for a couple years. They're similarly at the similar level, but just they didn't have the horses to get it done in the back end.
Best decision?
It was the play for Wentz. They don't go to that Super Bowl without Wentz taking them to 10-2 before he went down. And they just don't. I mean, like, Nick Foles starts every game that year. It's difficult to see him actually win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, because they hit the high end of his range of outcomes that year, where he was good on 3rd downs, good in the red zone, good under pressure, and it worked.
That's
arguably the MVP if he doesn't get hurt.
Yep. So that's like why we say the play, quarterback, payoff. Can be massive.
Pittsburgh Steelers' worst decision over the past 5 years. Head scratchers in the secondary. Artie Burns, Terrell Edmonds, those decisions. probably would like to have those back.
And those were similar to what we were talking about with some Mayock decisions, where everyone at the time was saying that's too high.
Yeah,
people had almost borderline UDFA grades on Terrell Edmonds because that was how he looked at Virginia Tech. Artie Burns was kind of thought of as firmly late day 2 cornerback. To add insult to injury, the guys drafted after Artie Burns, the next cornerback was Xavier Howard. After Terrell Evans, the next safety was Jesse Bates. So that's not really how it works, but their evaluations, their reaches on guys, they reached over elite players of their respective positions.
Best decision?
TJ Watt, dude. That 2017 edge class, I need to go back and actually look at all the names there, but it was kind of similar to this year's edge class where there was a lot of interesting names, a lot of talented dudes, but no real consensus sort of ranking, no real, a real pick or poison at the top, 6 or 7, because that was the one that had Solomon Thomas, that had Derek Barnett. You had, Myles Garrett was at the top, and then Solomon Thomas, Derek Barnett. You could see different evaluations on these guys all over the map. Tack McKinley, Taco Charlton, and all those guys went before TJ Watt. The only guy who's arguably as good or better than TJ Watt is Myles Garrett, who went number 1 overall in that draft. So, hell of a pick for the Steelers.
San Francisco 49ers, worst decision. Trading back from 2 to 3 was a good one, but picking Solomon Thomas at 3 in that class, that did not pan out.
Yeah, that was, man. And that's why when we say a guy doesn't win off the edge, Gregory Rousseau, when we haven't seen him beat tackles, that it's worrisome. It's not the same. It is a different skill set to beat guards than it is to beat offensive tackles. Some guys are great against tackles, can't kick inside to save their lives. Some guys can own guards and will just go on the outside and can't get to the edge. That was kind of Jadeveon Clowney's problem. That was Solomon Thomas's problem at Stanford. When he was an edge rusher, he was legitimately bad that year, his final year at Stanford. Freak athlete, great size, all this whatever, but it's still a skill. And he never developed on the edge. He probably should have just kept bulking up and getting a defense tackle because that's really the only place he looked good at.
Best decision for the San Francisco 49ers?
This one's easy. George Kittle, 146 overall in 2017. And that 2017.
Didn't he also have only 18 catches at Iowa the year before? He had very small sample size coming out, but he was a blocking machine.
And that's why the tight end position gets a low sample size. You don't get the targets in college. Not a lot of guys get the targets or the usage or anything that makes you feel good about the projection of them in the NFL. And so that's why he fell at 146 overall, despite being obviously a freak athlete. He tested like a monster at the combine.
Seattle Seahawks, worst decision over the past 5 years.
There's a lot. They haven't drafted. They were one of the worst drafting teams, if not the worst drafting team over that span. It's crazy looking back when the 2010 and 2012 Seahawks drafts are individually both all-time drafts. You talk about Russell Okung, Earl Thomas, Cam Chancellor in one, Bobby Wagner, Russell Wilson in another. Hall of Famers, multiple, in two different drafts that they had. And then DK Metcalf and Chris Carson, the only competent starters they've gotten over the last 5 years. Just brutal history, unfortunately for them. And the DK Metcalf, obviously their best draft decision over that span. He's in the Derwin James class of how the hell does that guy fall to that spot? 64 overall. How? He's 6'4", 225, and runs a 4.33 with a 40-inch vertical. It's just, and was not bad in college in terms of how he produced. It was not like he was a complete like Moritz Behringer. You got to teach this guy football. No, not at all. So that one was, and they took advantage of it.
Last three teams here. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, worst decision or worst draft decision over the past 5 years.
It's 2016 draft, man. Whew. It's honestly amazing looking back at it. Vernon Hargreaves at 11. They didn't make it to the end of his rookie deal. Noah Spence at 39. Then Roberto Aguayo. The GM of the year, in my opinion, this past year, in terms of, obviously, they won the Super Bowl because of Jason Light's moves the past 2 or 3 years and this past offseason. But to get Roberto Aguayo at 59. He's the same guy who drafted Roberto Aguayo at 69. It's just like hilarious to me.
I mean, it does speak to like the lottery system that is the draft. Like the best GM, in Jason Light hit on a very good draft for the past 2 or 3 years. Yeah. And then in 2016 went Hargraves, Spence, and Aguayo back to back picks.
Yeah. And that's why like the best decision that he made, in my opinion, was committing to the secondary. That was his best draft decision. Tristan Wirfs, amazing pick. Like one of the best picks in this past year's draft, outside of the quarterback position, maybe the best in terms of the talent they got, where they got him. All pro right tackle from day one, won them the Super Bowl. His ability to shut down Cam Jordan and Zadarius Smith, invaluable to them winning the Super Bowl. I don't think it's a great decision because everyone and their mother is drafting Tristan Wirfs at that spot.
Yeah.
He was the last tackle available.
They were actively trying to trade up and get his ass, though.
Okay, it's easy to say on the outside, yeah, Tristan Wirfs, we had him as the number 1 tackle going forward. You're going to say that on the outside. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But the decision to then, like, whoever was there, if it was Mekhi Becton, if it was Jedrick Wills, if it was Andrew Thomas, they were going to pick. They were going to get whoever was the last one. They got the best one as the last one. Like, good on them. But the fact that the Antoine Winfield, drafting him at 45 when they didn't need a safety, drafting Sean Bunting, Jamel Dean back-to-back in 2019 when they could have thought Vernon Hargraves this year he turns it on. That was year 3 for Vernon Hargraves. Or I guess year 4 for Vernon Hargraves.
Kind of did the opposite of what the Eagles did, like banking on development in the secondary.
Yes.
But they said, hey, even this guy develops or not, like we need more players. We need guys in the secondary.
And that was a year after going MJ Stewart, Carlton Davis in 2018. No one cares that MJ Stewart, did he get cut this past year or wasn't good at all? No one cares because all the other guys turned out well,
Yeah, makes sense. All right, last 2 teams. Tennessee Titans, worst decision. This one's obvious. Isaiah Wilson at 29. Now I don't even know if he's going to play with the team. He hasn't been officially released, but it's looking that way.
Yeah, it's easy to. This one could be it would be revisionist history to have said give up on Marcus Mariota sooner. There were people I remember back in, I think this was 2016 or 17, really beating their chest about Mariota being much better than Jameis Winston. Mariota winning that. People who had Mariota eval over Winston were really being like, yeah, that's true. And they fell off. Like there's something happened there. Was not even the same guy that we saw from early on in his career. So it would be revisionist history to say, oh, they should have drafted Mahomes or Watson because they passed on them for Corey Davis. But that was not how it was at the time. But Isaiah Wilson at 29 at the time was not good and still not good.
All right. Best decision?
It's a 2019 draft, man. They had one heck of a draft in 2019. Jeffrey Simmons stopping his slide at number 19 overall after the ACL. Not everyone would have done that. Draft a guy who was not going to play, maybe even for his entire rookie season. They did it. They've reaped the benefits. A.J. Brown in the 2nd, Nate Davis in the 3rd. He got all pro votes, Nate Davis. I don't know if you know that. I don't know how he got that, but he got all pro votes. And then Amani Hooker in the 4th. That's a David Long in the 6th. Like that's just a solid top to bottom draft. And going through, this is an interesting thing I found going through all these drafts the past 5 years for everybody. John Robinson, I think, has a philosophically most similar to what we do at PFF in terms of he's not drafting he values on-field production more so than super traits. Corey Davis was not a super traits guy, and maybe it came back to bite Corey Davis example. Rashaan Evans was not a super traits guy. A.J. Brown is a good athlete, but not a...
He's also productive as hell.
Yeah, productive as hell. Jeffrey Simmons. Jack Conklin.
Harold Landry.
Jack Conklin in the top 10 was not a super traits guy. So Harold Landry as well. But he was not, that's not been necessarily his MO.
Definitely values production. I've had conversations with guys at PFF that talk to John Robinson a ton about, PFF and grading and those things. Mm-hmm. So I definitely think he factors it in. Last team here, Washington football team. Worst decision, Dwayne Haskins at 15 in 2019, when at the time, I think when PFF was offering analysis, I thought, and I think other people here thought it was a good decision. Like it was worth the shot at 15, but obviously that did not pan out. I think that speaks again to development. We talked about Chris Sims earlier. I think Chris Sims had Dwayne Haskins as good as he's been with evaluating some prospects. You look, he had Joe Burrow and then Justin Herbert in 2020. Kyler Murray's the number one guy.
But again, Haskins is not it wasn't talent related.
No, it wasn't. I mean, what I was going to say is Chris Sims had Dwayne Haskins as number 3 quarterback in that class. We had him as a top 20 player in that class. I think it was largely development off field. Again, it speaks to that thing I've been talking about where hire this guy a personal assistant, man. Hire this guy a psychologist. He needs help being a professional. That's not a condescending thing to say. A lot of people need help being a professional, especially at Dwayne Haskins was 20 years old when he was drafted. Yeah. You don't think I needed help to be a professional at 20 years old?
Like a babysitter. You just give him a babysitter.
Babysitter is condescending too, Mike.
Give him a bottle when he starts crying.
You're being a dick. But I'm serious, though. I'm serious about getting some of these guys, these 20-year-olds, that you're asking to get. Here's the keys to the franchise.
He probably got enough bottles over the course of his Washington.
Hey, ease up. Those weren't strippers. It was his girlfriend's birthday. They were dancers. Anyway, best decision for the football team over the past few years.
Terry McLaurin. Got him at number 76 overall in the 2019 NFL draft. Number 1 type of wide receiver. And it is funny looking back at this, how many guys, the guys we're saying are the best picks. You got a bunch of wide receivers. You got Kenny Galladay, Justin Jefferson, Terry McLaurin, DK Metcalf. You got a bunch of quarterbacks. And you got a few safeties mixed in there with Jesse Bates and whatnot, Justin Simmons. But in a position we'd say is very valuable, safety. It's just, I think that's interesting to see. Not a lot of Saquon Barkley was the best picks. Not a lot of not a lot of running backs. Not a lot of guards that you're saying, oh, that guard Frank Ragnow, fuck, that got him, got him over the top. Maybe that's some flash bias on our part, but like the numbers would suggest those are the guys bringing value to the table.
The note I'll add there before we break and jump into the interviews with Carlos Boogie Basham Jr. and Patrick Surtain is that someone asked me recently, well, what are my favorite interviews of all time? Interviewing prospects and those things. I will say Jonah Williams is up there. Before he went to the Bengals, he was awesome. The other one is Terry McLaurin. I interviewed him after that matchup with Darius Slay a few years ago, and that was the first time I talked to the kid. He is absolutely brilliant. In addition to 4.3 speed, in addition to being a very efficient route runner and athletic, he is a very smart motherfucker who really gets it and understands like how to attack leverages and how to work against different players and stuff like that. So McLaurin, a steal for the Washington football team. That's going to do it. That was a long pod, dude. We went in on all 32 teams. Best and worst decision for all 32 teams. We are going to do a mailbag soon. If you want to get in the mailbag, leave a 5-star review, rate, review, and subscribe. Leave a 5-star review. Drop your question in there. We are doing more mailbags as we approach the NFL draft. We're going to try and fit in as many bonus mailbags as possible. We did that a week ago. We're going to continue to do that to catch up before free agency. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Until then, let's go ahead and jump to Carlos Boogie Basham and then Patrick Surtain of Alabama. Joining the 2-for-1 Drafts podcast is former Wake Forest edge defender Carlos Boogie Basham Jr. Carlos, great to have you on. Me and Mike, my podcast co-host, have been big fans of your game for a while, man. We've been talking about you since 2019 and have been really impressed with what you've done. This 2020 season was a wild one, obviously with COVID-19 impacting the season, but still showed up to play and now entering the 2021 NFL Draft. Boogie, great to have you on the show.
Good to be here. Thank you.
You're out there enjoying the glorious Phoenix weather. I think you said it's in the 70s before we jumped on. Cincinnati, a little different, in the 10s, 20s, but we'll live. What are you doing out there with Exos? What are you working on?
Mainly just, basic combine prep, a lot of speed work, a lot of agility, and there's just a bunch of strength work as well.
Are there any specific drills that you're prioritizing? You're like, man, I got to nail this one. Are you setting any goal times, say like for the 40, 10-yard split, 3-cone, any of that stuff?
My 40, I'm shooting for 4 or 5, and then all those others. Oh,
wow.
Yeah. And all those other times, it's just I'm going to shock a lot of people, just like with my athleticism when it comes with that.
Dude, 4 or 5 would be bonkers, man. That is incredible. What did you play at this past season weight-wise?
I was around between 285 and 280.
And do you plan to stay at that weight? Have any NFL teams asked you to bulk up, slim down, any of that stuff?
They were just like getting you comfortable with your goal weight. My comfortable weight is around 275, between that little range right there.
You dropped to 275, clock a 4.5, man. There'll be a lot more people talking about you than just me and Mike. I'll tell you that right now. That is very impressive, man. So in the limited experience you've had talking with teams, have you gotten any feedback on where they want to play you in the NFL? Are they seeing you as this kind of wide 9 edge defender? Do they want to kick you inside and stuff? I'd be interested to know how teams see you from a positional standpoint.
Mostly all of them, they say I can play all across the board. Just in college, I went from playing over 0 to 3 to 5. being able to cover guys in coverage. So, they're like, yeah, you're a nice little chess piece. You fit anywhere. So, I just take that into account when I'm training, not just working on edge drills, but also, doing linebacker work and also D-tackle work. So pretty much, they say I can just play anywhere across the board.
And I think that multi-gap versatility is massive for you in an edge class where it's a lot of guys that, are freaky athletes, but thinner frames. You're one of the bigger edge defenders in this class. At least that's being talked about at the top end. So I do think that multi-gap versatility is one of the strengths. What are some of the other strengths that you feel like separate you in this edge class?
For me, I would definitely say just my IQ of football. Just going from high school to college, high school playing mainly offense, you learn a lot just playing both sides of the ball. And then going to college, just playing strictly defense, you can pick out a lot of things the offense is doing a lot faster than some guys do. So I feel like my football IQ is what it's something.
So give me an example of that, of, football IQ showing up on the football field for you, playing along the defensive line. Where does that show up?
For me, showing them, just like in situational football, just picking out the defensive coordinator's tendencies, certain down and distances, and just like realizing who you're going against. Some people are passing teams, and third down, whether they can go and run for it or throw it. Then you have those teams who are like it's fourth and short, whether they're going for it or they go punt it. Just picking up those tendencies of the coaches and the quarterbacks. And then also just picking up on the quarterback's audibles. That's a big thing for defensive ends.
I'm glad you brought up, playing both sides of the ball in high school. You played tight end in high school. You also played center for the basketball team. Were you a stretch forward? Were you shooting threes, or you all low post? So talk to me about your game on the court.
Court, just high school, I had to play down low just because of, the height differential between the team. But yeah, I would say like I was all over the court, especially in travel basketball. We had a couple 6'8" guys, 6'9". So, that was when I was able to, show my guard potential, shoot a little bit.
Did you ever consider pursuing basketball in college, or when did football really take over for you?
Football really took over around my sophomore year. I had a couple Division I basketball looks, but it wasn't nothing major. But, then football came. I was like, this is my bread and butter. This is going to be able to get me out of here, help my family. So that's what I kind of took off of.
I mean, that's because they were playing you out of position. They play you at point guard the whole way through. I bet you're playing for freaking Gonzaga right now. Who knows? But I'm interested to talk more about your game at Wake Forest and specifically kind of what goes into a given game week for you from a film perspective. You brought up football IQ, and I think film is like one of the number one things when you're specifically for pass rusher, like looking at the opposing offensive tackle you're going to go against, seeing how he sets, seeing what his pre-snap looks compared to run and pass. What are you looking for when you're watching an offensive lineman that you're about to go against in the given game week?
On a game week, in the beginning of the week, those are our first and second down days. So it's mainly just, run stop. So, I'm picking up on whether he's like a high puncher, low, like what he does when he's pulling, how's he at the point of attack. Then like towards the end of the week, around Wednesday and Thursday, that's straight third down day. So, I'm looking at other guys he's went against, seeing what moves work against him. Can he move his feet well? How's he doing on power rushes? So that's mainly like my little thing going into game week.
Wednesdays and Thursdays sound like boogie days if those are pass rush days, I'll say that. But I do think that, what pass rush moves, so going against a certain offensive tackle, you can obviously see like, okay, he's susceptible to these types of moves, but do you have a primary move and a primary counter that you like to try against everyone, or does that really change week to week?
Week to week, it doesn't matter who I'm going against. I always want to set them up with power, with speed first. Seeing if they can seeing if I can beat them to that point of attack. If I beat him there, I'm going right around him. But my counter is just to swim over. If he gets me there first, I'm face with him. I'm gonna come inside him every time.
There you go, man. That you have it down pat. The other thing I wanted to ask you about is how much time. So you mentioned Monday and Tuesdays, early down days, Wednesday and Thursdays come to pass rush days. How much time during the season do you get to work with a positional coach on specifically pass rush moves? Do you have a lot of opportunities to like expand your tool belt and add moves to your list?
I would say not. It's not as much as during the season, just because all the things that coaches have to go through. But mainly for me, it's just being able in the off season, being able to go down because these past 2 summers I went down to Florida to work with Nathan O'Neill, great pass rush coach. So it's just those 2 summers like that really helped me separate myself from everyone else.
And now, how much are you working on pass rush moves now as you prepare for the pro day? And how much film are you watching? Are you watching film on yourself? Are you watching film on NFL guys to take some of their moves? I'd be interested to know like what you're working on to improve your on-field play right now.
I'll say right now, man, it's just me just working on my takeoff, playing at a heavier weight than I usually play. That just comes into play of, just keep working at it. And then film, we have film sessions every Saturday, not just watching yourself, but, watching other defensive ends and also watching offensive tackles, going against in the league. It's just like just a little mix and match of everything that we would do.
Are there any NFL players that you kind of cater your game after? On PFF's draft guide, we do have it as Marcus Davenport as a comparable player. Similar size, a guy that's added pass rush moves in the NFL. But I'm interested to know who you think kind of resembles your game at the next level.
I would definitely say I watched a lot of Jason Pierre-Paul and DeMarcus Lawrence. Those are two guys I've been studying for the longest. Just their play styles, across the board, how hard they play. I take that. That's a big thing for me, just how hard you play, how hard you go. And just watching those two guys, I fell in love with their game style, how they play.
Not enough people bring up Jason Pierre-Paul when I say that. Everyone's like Aaron Donald, Myles Garrett, Khalil Mack. Jason Pierre-Paul, underrated player there, especially from a motor and effort standpoint, a guy that really just never turns it off. I'd be interested too, like another question I had for you was when you're getting to the NFL, like what's your plan of impact? How do you want to impact as a rookie? Do you have goals for yourself in year one, in year two? Like how do you want to impact an NFL team early in your career?
Early in my career, I want to come in, just play my role. I don't want to just come in and be the cocky guy. I want to be the one who learns from the veterans around me, pick up on little things. In the league, everyone's good. So, just, being able to pick those little things apart of what can get me around that, all pro tackle I'm going against, or, just picking up the defense way faster than others.
Going back to your pass rush moves, I'd be interested to know pre-snap what goes through your head when you're setting up that pass rush plan, whether it's in that first few drives or even later in the game. What are you thinking about on obvious passing downs to kind of set up moves and pre-snap pass rush plans?
My first thing is always a good takeoff, because in pass rush, that's the most important thing. Without the takeoff, you ain't got nothing. So, once you get that good takeoff, it's all about, from then on, it's just on who you are, like whether you're a power rusher, whether you're a speed rusher, whether you're a finesse guy. For me, I'm more of a power rusher, but also a little speed. So, when I get to that point, it's I can either go both ways. Kind of makes it a little hard for tackles I go against.
Yeah, I mean, you're power first, but you run in the 4.5s. I think speed might have to be in the conversation here, Boogie. I'll definitely say that. I think the other thing with, edge rushers and offensive tackles, I think there's a very similar matchup with corners and wide receivers. And I feel like there's a mental side of the game as well. Talking a little trash, getting into the guy's, getting in the guy's head a little bit. How much of that goes on between you and an opponent in a given week?
With me, I'm not the guy who goes out there and just talks trash. But for me, if it's like a big game, history behind the game, it's just the adrenaline, get the rushing. Sometimes you may be a school that didn't, offer you or something. It's always just something behind you that gets you going. But for me personally, I just go out there, I play hard. If I don't really talk trash first, sometimes it'll come out first. I ain't gonna lie.
Sometimes you have to. I mean, you watch, Michael Jordan in that documentary. He creates reasons to get upset at his opponent. He creates reasons to get more competitive. I definitely think it adds a fire to the game. We can finish with this, Carlos, and I really appreciate the time. What do you think is your why? What's your motivation to be as successful as you are in the NFL?
My motivation, just seeing, growing up, I was the only child, seeing my mom and dad, work in and day out, just giving me the life I have, just looking in the crowd and seeing them happy. That's what drives me, especially this past year, getting my degree, that's as happy as I've seen them been. So, that's why I do it, just for them, being the only child growing up, it's just you and your parents growing up. So, that's my why. I love my parents to death. They know I'll do anything for them. So, I'm just doing this for them, just to be the second or third person in my family that play professional sports is big for me. And then just being able to see them smile day in and day out, regardless of what happens, that's what gets me going.
Family first, man. Awesome. Really appreciate it. Thanks again for jumping on, and I wish you the best of luck moving forward.
Sir, thank you.
Joining the 2-for-1 Drafts podcast is former Alabama cornerback Patrick Surtain, obviously son of a former NFL great and Patrick Surtain Sr. Great to have you on the podcast, man. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate you for having me on the show.
Of course, man. Let's go ahead and start with what you're doing right now. I know you're out there in Phoenix working at Exos to prepare for a future pro day for Alabama. I'm sure you're doing all of the drills to prepare for that combine, but are there any drills specifically where you're placing added emphasis or have heightened goals for right now? Are you looking to really have big time for the 40, 3-cone, or any drills that you're really trying to hit on?
The 40. I'm really focused on the 40 because teams knocking my speed right now. So I'm just focusing on that right now because I know the position drills is just going to carry itself. I've been doing it for the longest, so I'm not very worried about position drills. I'm just really focused on the 40. So that's my main emphasis right now.
Yeah, totally makes sense, man. And then what weight did you play at this past season? And then what weight are you planning to kind of play at next year?
I played like at 203, 204, around that range. And I'm looking to stay at that weight or even get it a little lighter. Based on how I feel at that weight, I feel like I could play smooth and very sound at that weight.
And when is your pro day? When do you plan to run the 40?
March 23rd.
Gotcha. March 23rd. Cool, man. Well, I want to turn back the clocks a little bit before we talk about, your obviously star-studded campaign at Alabama. You're a former 5-star, went to American Heritage, and you played opposite of another former 5-star in Tyson Campbell. You guys went, I think, undefeated for back-to-back seasons, won 2 state championships there. Can I get a story from one of those seasons about you guys just like locking people down? Like, that's got to be the best cornerback tandem high school football really has ever seen. Did you ever have teams just like not be able to throw the football on you guys?
Well, that's how it really be, though, because it was like our D coordinator, Chad Wilson, which is Marco's dad, he just really put us on islands on each of our sides. Like, he wasn't worried about what happened on the outside.
Yeah.
Because, teams wasn't going to really try to throw our way. So it was basically, it made his job much easier and it made the defensive schemes much easier, knowing that opposing teams would rarely throw the ball at each wave where we was defending them at. So, I think that time was the most funnest times of my years.
I mean, it had to have been. And I'm sure, what was your relationship or what is your relationship like with Tyson Campbell? I'm sure there was a lot of competitiveness between you two. Who's going to get more interceptions? Who's allowing more touchdowns? What is that relationship like and how much did you guys kind of fuel each other?
It's like a brotherhood relationship. I've been knowing Tyson ever since I was like 9, 8 years old. So just watching us get to this point, get to this next level, it's a blessing for both of us. And, we're high competitive athletes at the same time. It's just, like I said before, just watching us grow since from high school to college, to the pros now, I think it's just the ultimate blessing.
And did you guys ever go one-on-one? I know now you guys are both playing corner, probably don't see a lot of receiver, but I'm sure in high school you guys had gone one-on-one against each other a handful of times. Anyone win those reps?
What you mean by that?
Like, did you guys ever do like wide receiver corner one-on-ones between each other? Because I'm sure in high school, you're playing both sides a little bit more. I'm sure you maybe had opportunities to do that.
No, we never did that.
Really? Oh man, that would have been awesome.
I know. Some practices coaches put us on offense for a specific amount of plays going into the week, but we never like went against each other as far as receiver, DB, where I go receiver or he go to DB. No, we never did that before.
Damn, dude. I would sign up for that. That's pay-per-view right there. I'm ready to see it, dude. Let's get it. Let's make it happen.
Yeah.
So what went into that decision for you guys to kind of, obviously, there was opportunities for you both to go to the same school. Like, I'm sure there was probably part of you that wanted to play with Tyson again, like in college. What do you think went into that decision for you to go to Alabama and him to go to Georgia?
I just think it was a decision, after all, was the best decision for him and the best decision for me. We was thinking about going to the same school at one point. It was basically like, because we was both considering, Alabama high, of course. It would have been that situation, but, sometimes you got to do what's best for you. And like I said before, we both performed at a high stage and we did, what we did.
Now, looking ahead to the career you did have at Alabama, played a ton of outside corner, this past season and had a ton of success, specifically like limiting things downfield and all that stuff. I think some of your best strengths on tape for me, press technique and sticking with guys on the vertical route tree. What do you feel like, though? That's the third party scout. What do you feel like your strengths are? What separates you in this cornerback class?
I just believe my recognition, like you said, press skills, off skills, no matter what, I'm technically sound. On all phases of the cornerback position. And I feel like I'm going to come up and tackle and be physical with you. That's my main strengths.
And how much of an impact did, Trayvon Diggs have? I think you guys have similar skill sets and they're both long, bigger corners that win at the line of scrimmage. How much of an impact did he have on you? And what was that competitive fire like when you guys were playing together?
He brought a lot of competitive energy in practice, in the games. I know one time he said, don't let none of the receivers catch the pass on you. That should be your mindset, going into every week, every practice. So, just having him on the opposite side of me, I just felt like I learned a lot from him. And, he's doing great things in the NFL, but I feel like just having him on my side, it was just like another Batman Robin type of duo, both long, tall corners that's physical at the line. It was honestly, it made the defensive job much easier.
Yeah, I bet. Another former teammate that I would love to talk about is, there's a lot of conversation around these Alabama receivers, Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith. If you had to guard one-on-one, who's the best of that group? Can you tell me who the best of that group is? I know that's a hard conversation, but if you can't, talk to me about these guys and just how successful they've been at Bama.
That's a tough question. I feel like what makes them kind of ordinary is that they all got one specific traits that separate them. Like Smitty, he's a smooth route runner, gonna catch everything. Ruggs, speedster, vertical threat. Jeudy releases, routes, all that. Waddle, speed, releases, routes. So I just feel like they bring certain things to the table that opposing defenses don't know which to scout, because you could scout one receiver for this, but you got to also look for another receiver and what he's capable of doing. So it was a very going against them every day in practice made me better as a player,
And I was talking to Amari Rodgers recently, the Clemson wide receiver, and he was saying that they do one-on-ones 2 days a week, working one-on-ones against cornerbacks. Were you guys doing that at a similar cadence at Alabama? And in those one-on-ones, how much fun was that, working against, honestly, future first-round wide receivers every single week?
At Bama, we didn't do one-on-ones. We did 2-on-2 slot cover. But it's basically one-on-ones, it's just a slot and the X receiver and a star in the corner. But going against those guys every day, whether it's in team periods, 7-on-7s, I just learned a lot because it made my technique even more fundamentally sound. And because you want to get those type of caliber receivers every day, every week in the season. So going against them, it felt like a game day experience,
And so I want to talk more about your process in a given game week and what you do to prepare for each offense that you're going against. How much film are you watching in a given week, and what exactly are you looking for on film from an opposing wide receiver or an opposing offense to make sure that you're best prepared?
Going through the week, I take majority of the time on film, especially out of the complex, out of the field, on my own time, so I could just understand the opposing team's tendencies, what they like to do, out of certain formations, certain concepts, and also looking at their top targets out of each receiver and see what they like to do specifically using that receiver. And also, I just apply it on the field, recognize concepts and recognize plays, because we also have meetings before practice. And, we go over tons of film, even in meetings. And we also have walkthroughs during practice, which help me, understand other teams' concepts and stuff like that.
And you mentioned, earlier that teams are knocking you for your long speed and you want to prove them wrong in the 40, but to make up for not being a 4.2 guy, is it all consistency and technique? Is it film study? How do you make up for not being the fastest cornerback out there?
I just believe that technique wins at the end of the day, technique. And, just knowing what you're doing out there helps a lot, because speed's not the main part of the game. It helps, but it's not the main part of the game, like you said. But I believe my technique and everything I do that starts at the line, that starts at the snap, that's what helped me win majority of my snaps.
Who are, outside of the Alabama guys in the receivers you win against, who are some of the tougher receivers you win against? Who are the guys that gave you kind of the most fits at corner?
During my career?
Yeah.
I say CeeDee Lamb. He was a pretty good receiver. I say Josh Palmer. He was pretty good. The Florida receivers, all those guys. I feel like going against those guys, I believe they gave me more problems than anything, but it wasn't crazy and nothing like that. But I believe that they was the top receivers I went against.
What's your opinion of the Ohio State guys, Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson?
I think they pretty good. I say Garrett is the more complete receiver. Chris is the more vertical speed guy that they use. I think they both are dangerous duo because they could cause havoc on opponents' defenses and stuff like that. But I just feel like what they bring to the table is set for their offense. You know, they get used in a variety of ways depending on what they need to use them for. So I feel like they both great receivers at the end of the day.
Obviously, you know, watching a ton of film in season, preparing each week, how does that film study shift in the off season? Do you watch a lot of film on yourself or guys in the NFL? What are you watching right now?
I'm watching old tapes, even tapes where I feel like I could have done better on, looking at my technique, you know, correcting some things in the game. And I also watch a lot of NFL film study, just to get to know, you know, offense in the NFL, because, you know, it's a lot of variety of things, RPOs, you know, basically deep, vertical, in-breaking, out-breaking, all those type of routes, you know. So I just want to get a feel for that. So I wouldn't have to worry about that once that time comes.
Are there any NFL cornerbacks that you watch a lot of that you try to like pattern your game after?
I look at a lot of corners. I look at basically corners that's like my body type, you know, my skill set. So I look at Jalen Ramsey a lot, Tre'Davious White, Jair Alexander, Stephon Gilmore, all those guys, you know, elite cornerbacks in the league right now, just to get a film of what they do best and what they do that's not so good, so I can understand, like, okay, like, because I just look at my body type and I just relate that to their game, you know?
Well, what do you feel like, I haven't asked a lot of people this, but what do you feel like is the biggest transition from going to play corner in the NFL or corner in college to playing corner in the NFL? Because I think a lot of people bring up, you know, the contact rule. Like, you know, you could have more contact at corner beyond 5 yards than you can in the NFL. Is that a big transition, or is it more just like the speed of the game? I'd be interested to know what you think like the biggest hurdle is going from college to the NFL, regardless of, you know, talent level, but just playing corner.
Like you said, the hand rules, that's probably a different thing. You know, you can only jam receivers into the 5 yard line. So I feel like that's the difference. But also, you know, the amount of different receivers you're going to get each and every week in the league. You're going to get bigger, faster, quicker, shiftier receivers in the league, and you know, better quarterbacks at that each and every week. So I just feel like, you know, going into the league, it'll be a little step, but I understand, like, and I feel like the tempo going to be faster as well too. And that's going to be the difference from college and NFL.
Yeah, I mean, the competition level is just massive. Like, even playing in the SEC, you're going to see talent in the NFL that's even better than that. And obviously, it just gets better every single week. We can finish with this one. And I think this is a fun question, you know, when talking to any defensive back prospect. It's really, you know, what your opinion is on talking trash. Because I do think it's, you know, it's a game within a game, playing corner and going against wide receiver, seeing the same guy over and over, like a Josh Palmer, like the Florida guys. What's your opinion of getting into the mental side of it, talking a little trash, trying to get into the head of your opponent?
I'm not that much of a trash talker. I just let my play do the talking.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll say some occasions where I do talk trash, like some points where I feel like I'm on my A game and I need that type of edge going towards that game. But, you know, I'm not that much of a trash talker. You know, I just let my play do the talking and my preparation do all that. So
I was talking to some Notre Dame guys, and they were saying, man, Alabama's defense, they talk a lot of trash and they're good at it. Who is some of the guys that you've played with that talk a lot of trash and just like really like use that as a part of their game?
Say it again.
Who are some guys that you've played with at Alabama that like really leverage talking trash and try to be like consistently talking on that defense?
Christian Barmore.
That's what that's what I've heard. I've heard Barmore. I heard Barmore's a chatterbox, man. I heard that guy talks a ton.
He gonna try to put fear in the opposing O lineman because you know, he's a big dude, but he also gonna talk trash. You know, he's that type of dude where you want to have the edge on the field. You know, he's a mean, nasty guy. So like he just gonna make sure he had that edge, and make sure he's the most physical player on the field. You know, I feel like with him, he really hypes the defense up and motivates the defense.
That's awesome, man. Well, I really appreciate you setting aside the time and jumping on the podcast. Wish you the best of luck moving forward. Good luck at the Pro Day, and then obviously on to the NFL.
Appreciate you. Thanks for having me on the show.